I have Satan with me. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome to MythVision, Apostate Prophet. I'm not even going to waste any time with you because in a couple hours, I got to pick my kids up from school. And you know how that goes. Welcome back, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm trying to find you on my screen. Oh, yeah, here you are. Okay.
You must have a big screen, man.
Yeah. I'm really happy to be back. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm doing good. I want to go ahead and clear the air real quick. We're going to be talking about the Kaaba. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Kaaba, Kaaba, however you want to pronounce it. We're going to be talking about this and your recent controversy that's happened. And it's not just recent. Like, this has been going on for a long time with you doing ex-Muslim material. This morning, I just want to address the elephant in the room on Twitter. I had a bunch of Muslims who said that Zara K made a mistake and she's lying, right? She said that in Islam, you marry your rapist. And I said, well, I don't know what Islam teaches, right? I focus on what I've known from biblical studies. And I said, well, in the Hebrew Bible, a woman's prized possession, her virginity, her worth and value kind of goes out the window when that's taken if she's not married. So they have to pay the father who's owner, the children are property, the daughter's his property, for her, and usually the rapist would then marry her, and the law is he can never divorce her. Now, that's a different way of practicing than we would ever want today. But maybe you can address that real quick before we get into the Kaaba.
Sure, I can make a few comments on it. I mean, I was basically telling you a little bit about this in the back. I haven't really heard of the controversy that's going on, so I haven't really seen what the backlash is and what exactly was said. But so as far as the whole marrying your rapist stuff is concerned, I would definitely say that there is no such thing in Islam's fundamental laws and scripture. There is no. I mean, as far as I know, maybe I'm making a mistake. I'm making a mistake here. I don't know. But as far as I know, I want to be entirely fair. There is no such law, no such ruling that somebody has to marry their rapist, or that you have to give your daughter to the rapist, or anything like that. There are certain cultural practices that we have heard of, that I know of, within certain Muslim cultures, where such laws are applied in order to escape the shame of having a daughter who was raped. The parents resort to arranging a marriage between the victim and the rapist. Things like these take place. We have heard of them. I have heard of them.
Right.
I've seen reports of them, but I would not go as far as to say that there is an authentic Islamic ruling and scriptural evidence which encourages such an action.
And that's why in the interview, I want to clarify the air here. I mentioned Hebrew Bible on what I do know. And we know this is an Abrahamic, I would suggest an Abrahamic and a Christian Abrahamic blend, as well as pagan combination here when you start to get into Islam. As I've been researching and looking into these PDFs from experts who've written on it, I'm starting to get more and more curious. Like, hold up, this region had tons of Christians. I mean, we're talking Nabateans, Byzantine, you name it, all throughout the Arabian Peninsula, eastern, western coast, doesn't matter. So I'm really going to do a deep dive into here, and we're going to talk about the Kaaba. So I apologize for having to have you mention this, but I want you to mention that, if you didn't mind. Mr. Monstrous is two of my favorite atheist YouTubers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. If you will, take us into the controversy. What happened recently on, is it Hamza's Den?
Hamza's Den, yeah.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, I have been doing some work on critically analyzing Islam for quite a while now, and a long time ago, maybe 2 years ago or so, I went deep dive into the Kaaba, which is at the core of Islam, the foundation of Islam. It is something that Islam is built on. In fact, one of the pillars of Islam concerns going to the pilgrimage and surrounding the Kaaba, and the Kaaba is at the core of Islam. I mean, it's like it is the image that everyone gets when you think about Islam, the Kaaba, the cube, which people surround themselves around. So I analyzed this a long time ago, made use of different academic sources, analyzed it myself, and came to the conclusion, like many others, like many academics have, that the Kaaba is of pagan origin, that it has no link to Abrahamic monotheistic religion, and that the historicity of the Kaaba is very clouded, very disputed, and that as far as historical sources are concerned, the Kaaba doesn't go very far back. It only emerges within historical sources around the time of Islam. Together with that, we have Kaabas, so-called Kaabas, cubes, and similar temples around Arabia when Islam emerges. And after the emergence of Islam, after the emergence of Islam, Muhammad basically gets rid of one Kaaba, which we know by name, which is called Dhul Khalasa, which was in the south. He explicitly is reported to command one of his soldiers to go and to destroy that one for him.
Was this the one with a red stone or a white stone? Or?
It is. According to the report, it was white. It is not entirely clear whether it has a white stone or whether the building is white or whether something about it is white. But it is emphasized that it is that the symbol of it is a white stone or a white rock, which is very ironic because in the Islamic sources we are told that the Kaaba has a black stone at the corner, and we are told that it is black because of the sins of mankind. It was originally white. So I made some studies into this whole thing, and recently I went on this live stream of this Muslim panel called The Arena on this YouTube channel called Hamza's Den. I joined them, never thought they would actually let me speak. I joined them and I started asking questions about the Kaaba, which is a topic that I completely randomly picked just like 1 minute before I joined. And I basically said, Islam is at the foundation of Islamic religion, but if we look at history, we have no historicity of the Kaaba, we have no historicity of Mecca, there is no connection between the Kaaba and Abrahamic religion. How do you guys explain this? And the guys quickly became quite angry and quite hostile with me, began to make arguments, began to appeal to certain vague elements within the Bible, trying to reinterpret them as pointing at the Kaaba, which is ludicrous.
It's almost like they look at the if you don't mind, the Quran, they'll look and it says the house of the Lord, right? And then if you find a phrase in the Bible that says the house of the Lord, they think Kaaba means house of the Lord. And I was looking at a scholarly paper here by a woman who it had to be translated from German. Her name is Barbara Fenster, and she wrote like an extremely detailed report about this, and she goes like back into the 300s and works down into the time of the era of Muhammad and shows the Nabateans, the Byzantine artwork, that there's actual crosses in a lot of the mosques that are within their artwork that come from the Byzantine and early Christian ideas down into the Islamic stuff. So I'm thinking there's a pagan blend going on with already Christian ideas. This is what I'm thinking is going on. But look, I just tapped into 2 PDFs this morning, and I want anyone who's watching MythVision to know, like, not only do I want to work with you more in the future, because I think we have the same vision of trying to like educate people, but I want to have these PhDs come on and like, what are you going to say? My tradition says, or like archaeologists and scientists and people who aren't coming into this saying, I got to prove this right, can come in and say, this is what it looks like, and give you the data and you can interpret it yourself. So, sorry.
Well, I want to go after the truth. I want to go after what is fact. I don't want to be blinded by my zeal for, some bias against a certain ideology or a certain belief. I honestly don't want to be completely directed and blinded by that. I don't want to trust certain traditions and certain religious beliefs just because they want to hold on to their truth claims. I want to find out the truth. And as far as we look at the truth, as far as we look at the evidence, the archaeological, the anthropological evidence, as far as we look at logic, it is simply absurd to even claim that the Kaaba is what Islam tells us the Kaaba is. And we can further go into the history of that, and I can explain why that is the case. I would definitely love to hear the opinions of scholars, of people who have done academic research on this matter, to see their input. I would love to sit together and hear and listen to them. I am not I have not done the academic work officially on the Kaaba. all that I have done in that region is in that field is to take courses on religion and on anthropology. But I do this mostly myself. I would love to bring people in who actually have the authority on paper to talk about this stuff and to put them here. The issue is, if we want to trust people who actually have the degrees and the authority, we will clearly see that the vast majority, except for a very fringe handful of people, agree that the Islamic narrative is nonsensical. It doesn't agree with reality.
I like to use an analogy, and then if you don't mind, we hit these super chats. I just want to make sure I stay on the people who help support the channel, as you do. You look out for the people who look out for you. That happens within Christendom. A lot of Christian scholars who are more on the fundamentalist side, who need the narrative to fit their preconceived ideas, they will do the same thing. So you have to be careful when someone is titled a scholar. You have to be very cautious about, like, okay, what kind of scholar is this? I mean, is this guy coming into this like with this motivation within his worldview to push his narrative right? And I see it a lot within Christianity. So there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to dealing with, I think, Islam, when I've been dealing critically with Judaism and Christianity. So Mr. Monster, thank you so much for the super chat. Is it possibly true that the original direction to pray towards was Petra and not Mecca? I heard it was Jerusalem.
The traditional narrative is that it was toward Jerusalem. There is some recent research, especially led by several people, Jay Smith and Dan Gibson. Is that true? Yeah, I think they are leading this research right now on the pursuit of finding out whether Mecca was originally Petra, and whether something happened at the very beginning of Islam that Petra became unusable, and the Islamic Empire kind of took control over Mecca and made that their a headquarter of their religion and stuff like that. I don't entirely trust that whole narrative so far. I don't think there is enough evidence to support that, and there is too much evidence to the contrary. But the traditional narrative is that certain prayer directions that we see in from the very beginnings of Islamic history, and we also see this in Islamic scripture, point toward Jerusalem. But you could also interpret that as pointing toward Petra, because it wasn't really easy for the people back then to figure out the proper direction between Jerusalem or Petra from down from Mecca. So there's that. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Sid Dave says, if Abraham built Kaaba, why did none of the subsequent prophets from Moses, Joseph, Jesus, David ever mention or bother visiting this place? Truth is, Abraham never existed, and it was made up BS story. Well, thanks a lot for the super chat, man. I don't want to get everybody all lost on the topic here, but ultimately, even if, and I mean, look, I side with Sid on this, but even if there was an Abraham and all of these things are somehow historically reliable, from what I understand, you go way back, these guys were in the Arabian Peninsula were very pagan. These weren't Abrahamic people. So most likely they would have had at best like tabernacles, but I doubt they would have had. Now you go 3rd millennium BCE, that's a whole nother question. And I was just reading that in the PDF. That's a different ordeal, but it's not Kaaba. So it's like, okay, what is going on here?
The issue is here, the problem that we have here is Islam relies on basing itself on Abrahamic religion, on claiming that the Islamic religion and Muhammad's preachings are the actual, the actual legacy, the actual descendant from Abraham, and that all the other religious groups, the Jews and Christians, have basically corrupted Abraham's belief. Now, whether or not Abraham actually existed, what he actually did, and all that is completely, we can't really make that out. We have no historical evidence to that. We have nothing. Could be complete nonsense, could be fairy tales, whatever it is. The problem is the sources that we have about Abraham and the things that he did and about Abrahamic history have been for thousands of years in the hands of Hebrew tradition, of Jews and Christians. Those sources, those places are where we take the entire information, the entire narrative about Abraham and all the things that he did and prophets that came after him from. Now we have Islam, which emerges much later without any connection to any of that, in a completely distant region in Mecca or Medina. It emerges in the 7th century AD, and suddenly Islam makes a huge claim about what actually happened and how Abraham actually built a temple there or an altar there. And the problem with that is, as pointed out, if Abraham did indeed exist, and if Abraham did indeed go to Mecca and build the Kaaba, and the claim is much bigger than this. According to the Islamic claim, Abraham not only built the Kaaba, he also invited all mankind.
That's what gets me. Yeah.
To come to pilgrimage to the Kaaba, and according to the traditional narrative, his voice was spread to the entire world, and people from all around the world came to Mecca, to the Kaaba, to circumambulate this cube. And this was the first house of Allah within the mother of cities, according to the Quran. But yet, when you look at history, the Jews and all the prophets and all the books have no connection to this, no knowledge, nothing of this. We have no historicity of this, no archaeological records of this, no secular history, nothing at all. It just seems ridiculous,
So for those who are watching, I just figured this out. I had never used the term circumambulate, and it's the idea of just running or walking around in a circle surrounding what we see at the Kaaba today, where Muslims walk around. And so that was definitely a pagan ritual. That was nowhere in any Abrahamic faith. I just think, the claim that you just brought up is what shoots them in the foot, is this universal thing. Like, if this is some backwater thing, okay. And at some point, I do want to potentially bring one Muslim on at a time, if they're watching, to be able to engage with you, Apostate Prophet, and have a conversation. Sid sends another super chat. He says, Muhammad claimed Abraham visited Arabia and built the Kaaba. Joseph Smith claims that Jesus came to America. Ahmadiyya Muslims claim Jesus went to India. There are just an attempt to localize these religions. Interesting point. I was going to say, Sid, that's wonderfully said. The other thing is, Allah blinded people and made people think Jesus was crucified, right? Like, he tricks everybody. And it's like, is that a card trick they might pull out and go, well, no one knows about it because it's been covered up by all these pagan rituals and things like this? Or what are the responses you've gotten back?
I mean, it is a completely funny topic to discuss. The issue is, if you want to go into whether it is logically consistent, you could not necessarily argue that their claim that Jesus was indeed not crucified and that Jesus was taken up by Allah to heaven and the Christians were just fooled. It's not logically inconsistent. It is not necessarily logically refutable. But think about it seriously. I mean, do you really want to believe that Allah apparently is the Almighty Allah who sent Jesus with a message to be delivered to mankind in order to put them on the right path again? But the coming of Jesus did nothing that is in favor of this Islamic Allah and the Islamic narrative. What happened is that through the coming of Jesus, the biggest ever heretical religious group emerged, which is still the largest religious group today, Christianity. What do you really want to believe, that this is what Allah did for you? This is what Allah did for himself and for Islam, that he sent a guy who was used by people and who deceived people because of Allah, and therefore this huge perversion, according to the Islamic perspective, the perversion of Christianity came into existence. That doesn't really make sense, does it?
Kind of weird how this all works. Yeah, I mean, I agree with the issues that we could always poke there, but the poking I want to do ultimately is looking into the Islamic research and stuff. So Paul Tarsus, real quick, just made a good point. He talks about the temple. Jews did circle the temple at Jericho. And that is something that is, I guess you could say, circumambulating, but they're also playing music. I don't know if that's something that the Islamic narrative plays, that they're playing music while doing this circle. But
as far as I remember, when you look at the traditional sources, I think the idea is that people before Islam, the polytheists before the Islamic time, before Muhammad's emergence, did engage in certain practices. They would circumambulate the Kaaba 7 times, and 7 is a number that is very significant in Middle Eastern, Semitic, Mesopotamian cultures, and so on. It was significant to the Sumerians, as far as we can historically track. They did circumambulate the Kaaba. They did different things, like asking for fertility, rubbing themselves against that black stone for fertility, singing, dancing, getting naked, and things like that. It is also described in Islamic sources that women would shake their butts at the southern Kaaba in Yemen, and so this is supposed to be a traditional practice.
Damn, I wish I was there. Thank you for the super chat. Islam was made by Babylonian Jews by ways of Nestorian Christians. If you don't know Mesopotamian Judaism or Syriac Christianity, you will be lost. I was reading something. Thanks for the super chat. I was reading something earlier where the discussion was on this topic, where they said there was this fringe version of Christianity, which was ancestry or worship, kind of a blend. What we had is, how they worship the saints. If you look back into earlier churches, Byzantine and I think Nestorian Christianity that he's talking about, or the Nabatean, I can't remember, but either way, they had like these saint worship ideas by the 6th century, and they're worshiping these idol images, some made of gold and silver, of saints. And here you have this issue being brought in where paganism and kind of Christianity are finding a way to mix, and there are Jewish, there's definitely a bunch of Jewish synagogues, if you will, around. So you have everything you need to make this, but nope, this is the unique, the special. It's like, woo, where's the cautious critical thinking in all of this?
We actually have a source, just to add to that quickly, from early Christian sources, early Christian writers, especially one of them whose name escapes my memory right now, whose book I read. They describe that certain heretical groups of Christians are very have high populations in Arabia. So they describe Arabia, people who have unacceptable, unorthodox, contested Christian beliefs have found refuge in Arabia. So the region is home to groups that are not accepted within the traditional Christian movements. The one issue is just that according to the traditional reports, Muhammad was in contact with a Nestorian Christian. The cousin of his first wife was a converted Nestorian Christian, and Nestorians basically their big dispute is more about Christology. It's more about they have this view that that Jesus is 2 separate persons, divine and human, who are separate people and who share one human body. And I think that is their major dispute, which is why they were counted as a heresy. But in effect, they also do believe in the divinity of Jesus. And it seems that Islam was impacted by that, but eventually ended up rejecting that entire belief as well.
Yeah, we see little snippets, There's some stuff about Jesus. You go, whoa, I've heard people talk about that. David the Goliath, thank you. He says, according to Islam, the Muslim Jesus will come back, destroy the cross, declare himself to be a Muslim, and then defeat the Gog and Magog tribes, which were imprisoned by Alexander the Great. Laugh in my... Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Yeah, but okay. Yeah. How do you feel? Okay, I'd love to keep going into this. I'm going to send a link out. Maybe there's a Muslim in the chat who'd be interested in having a discussion with you. Hopefully friendly. I don't mind if they're upset or if they want to respond to you, but reasonably, if I got to boot them, I'll boot them. But yeah, I'm going to send out a link here. Let's see what happens. Are you okay with this?
Sure, I'm totally fine with that. Can we go into one more topic before we do that, which is one of the major objections to the whole Kaaba issue, to the Kaaba problem, as I want to call it now. When I raised the Kaaba problem, the idea that reality completely conflicts with the Islamic narrative of the Kaaba, One objection that they brought up, which we fleetingly mentioned at the beginning, is that the Bible in Psalms 84 mentions a place called the Valley of Baca. And certain Muslim apologists, like the ones that I have encountered in the chat, want to assert that this Valley of Baca is a reference to Mecca, because the Psalm describes that people on their pilgrimage going to the house of God walk through the valley of Baca and cause springs there. And this is the major objection. This is the major find that they have. And the problem with that is, when you first hear it, it sounds like, oh, what a coincidence. Baca, Mecca, And the Quran also calls Mecca Bakka at the very beginning, at first. The problem is that this word Baca in the Bible is not actually Baca, it's actually a Baha. It's a completely different letter. Hebrew and Arabic come from the same language family, and the letter which is used in Baha is unrelated to the letter which is used in Mecca, which sounds completely different. The psalm actually clearly describes people who are separate and who express their longing for Jerusalem, for the house of God, for Zion, for the tabernacle or the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem. And they express how beautiful of a feeling it is to go there, to walk through a valley of weeping before they arrive full of joy or full of sadness before the house of God. And what the verse also describes is that they shed tears, which it metaphorically describes as them causing a spring or a rain. So the verse actually doesn't say anything like a well or a spring or a house of God in some place called Bakka or anything like that at all. But this is this is how far they will go to try and prove that the Islamic narrative is true.
Well, I've seen they're not alone in going super far and on a stretch without really good, obvious evidence to create a narrative to make it work. So, I mean, look, there's always possibilities, right? You can make anything potentially work if you try hard enough at it.
Yeah.
That's one thing Bart Ehrman said when I had him on. And I was like, what about this contradiction and that contradiction? They say there's no contradiction. He goes, if you work hard enough at anything, you can make anything not a contradiction if you want to. It's about like what is the most probable and seems the most likely. And so, yes. All right. I'm sending out the StreamYard link. This is only for Muslims. I don't want anyone else popping on, please. I will have to kick people. No offense. If I end up kicking you, it's because you just didn't listen to anything I just said. So,
Fine.
So as far as this whole issue, what kind, like when they responded, they used this in that live discussion with him. I didn't watch the whole video that you did. It's Hamza's Den, correct?
Hamza's Den.
Hamza's Den. Okay. I've seen the clips on your channel, and I briefly saw who else was it? Maybe it was just from your channel. And then I watched your discussion with the other Muslim guy, Khalil, I think it is.
Oh yeah.
That was actually a really good conversation, by the way.
It was very nice. I loved that. I posted 3 videos of that whole discussion. One was the whole discussion is like 58 minutes long or so, the entire time that I was there until they had to kick me out of there. I posted a brief joke video, basically, in which I asked them to provide proof that the Kaaba was at once monotheistic, and then they all get all mixed up. And then I posted an actual analysis of the Quran's claim that Abraham did build the Kaaba and invite all mankind. But yeah, the major objection that they have brought up was about this whole Psalms 84 Valley of Baca, which I defended during the live stream and said, this is ridiculous. This refers to Jerusalem. The valley is a random place around Jerusalem. This is the scholarly consensus. I mean, there's no reason why it would refer to Mecca. And even if we granted for a second that it does refer to Becca, to Mecca, this would mean that that this is right there in the Psalms, which Jewish people have been singing forever. But for some reason, nobody has any memory, any knowledge, any recollection of this Kaaba and of Mecca, and it appears nowhere in history until the emergence of Islam. It's quite ludicrous. But yeah, that was the major issue, and I am going to make an extensive analysis and response to that quite soon, in a few days.
Awesome. I actually just someone asked us, said, Derek, hold on, let me see where we're at here. The link is in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. If you're Muslim and you're interested in coming on and having a conversation with Apostate Prophet, please do so. He said to bring on a scholar. Oh, yeah. Orthodox Crusade 55. Bring a scholar, as you promised. And me and you talked about this before I hit live. I'm actually in conversation with about 4 or 5 different scholars right now. And I will be on a trip right now going to interview Dr. Dennis R. McDonald and Richard Carrier over the next week. So when I get back, don't you worry, my friends. We will have experts in the field that will be taking a very close examination on its origins and is there consistent transmission? Is it really perfect? Like a lot of Christians think that the Bible, the biblical New Testament, Old Testament, is inerrant, infallible, perfect. The Holy Spirit of God has preserved it perfectly. So it's not really a new claim. But all right, we have a gentleman in the chat, the Canadian. Welcome. Are you a Muslim?
Thank you very much.
Are you a Muslim?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So, one, I'd like to say thank you very much for this channel. This has generally been my safe haven of determining how many people there are who are generally curious and want to hash out the truth, and who really want to display the innermost ability to really dissect something and actually say that they care. And generally whenever I say that I am one of those to whatever religious group that I'm, discussing, like whether it be Christians or Jews or Muslims, I'm generally shunned from that community. I've been called Satan. I've had a Quran thrown at me. I've had Bibles thrown at me. And it's interesting because
the Canadian, real quick, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that we know you are a Muslim.
I believe that the Prophet Muhammad is from God. Okay. So I belong to a faith called the Bahai faith, and we fully believe that the Prophet Muhammad is from God.
Interesting.
And we believe that the Prophet Muhammad is who he said he was. However, the reason why I'm here is because I do believe that there are things that Muslims say about the Prophet Muhammad that the Prophet Muhammad wouldn't say about himself. Just like how Christians say things about Jesus that Jesus wouldn't say about himself. That if we were to dissect the Bible, we would be able to identify things that currently Christians believe that really couldn't be supported if we actually understand Christ's angle on his own ontology. For instance,
do you have a perspective on the whole Kaaba issue and what your stance, what your general stance on that is?
Yeah. So one of the things that I just wanted to factor in, because let's pretend we're all detectives here trying to analyze this situation, and then offer evidence on the table so that we can come to a proper conclusion. One of the things that we can say is that, one, Mecca's never mentioned. That's one. Okay. 2, the Kaaba. It's whatever that means, right? It's not what the Muslims are currently doing, because you have the Quran saying, for instance, that if you want this book, anything of this book, be confirmed, refer to the old books, refer to the things that we've sent to you. For instance, in chapter 5. I can't remember the exact verse, but
so you agree with us that the Kaaba and Mecca actually has no historicity and no connection to the real
pre-7th century.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the things that the Muslims are doing today is not what the Quran has prescribed for the Muslims to do. So a large majority of the circumambulation and the bowing of the stone and so on and so forth is actually not in the Quran. So where is it coming from? Mm-hmm. So a large majority of the practices within the religion is generally viruses of external viruses invading into the sphere of the religion itself. And the question becomes, where did this circumambulation come from if it's not found in the Quran? You know what I mean?
I'm going to give Apostate, listen, this is your show. So I'm going to have you choose whether you want to move to the next person or not in particular, because we wanted a Muslim, and I understand Bahai kind of encompasses that whole thing. You kind of encompass multiple faiths in Bahai, but go ahead.
Let's do this, Canadian. I always wanted to talk to somebody of a Bahai perspective, so it's very interesting.
Here I am.
I would like to. I think you could talk at some point to Derek about your whole Bahai perspective, because this is something that is very much unexplored, uncharted. I would like to invite you on my channel sometime to talk about your views on things. Please get in touch with me. I think for now it would be better for us to focus on somebody who can defend the whole Kaaba issue, so that we can have a disagreement here and sort it out. But I really appreciate you coming on.
I just want to say before I leave, or before I get kicked out, because I don't know how the dynamic works for leaving, but I just want to say thank you very much for this channel. That's one. Two, I really encourage you to pursue more discussions, and if there's anything that I can do to provide you with information on anything that you're researching, please understand that I'm one of those who sits in your camp as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
You have a good one, Canadian, and we'll see you around.
Take care.
All right. So we have another gentleman in the, I believe he is a Muslim, and I believe you're going to have someone who's going to disagree with you here, Apostate. Let's keep this obviously control. I'm going to be bringing on Eats Eating here in just a second. I've had him on before in a discussion. He's passionate about it. So as long as we can be reasonable, we're good. And like I said, if you're a Muslim, the link is in the chat. You guys are more than welcome to pop on. And, I'll have you waiting in the, what do you call that? The lounge area or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wait there, and then we'll pop you on. We'll try and give everybody like 5 minutes at a time. If it's really juicy, we'll let Apostate choose when you want to move on to the next person and stuff. So real quick, super chat, Mr. Monster, why do birds poop on the Kaaba?
That's a video title that I made.
No, you didn't. You're horrible.
Well, it's because there is this claim that birds do not fly over the Kaaba, and then there's actual footage of birds pooping on the Kaaba. So I basically made a joking response to that whole thing. So.
Oh, that's hilarious. Roger Wenzel, thank you so much for the super chat. I learned so much from your channel. Thank you. Well, thank you for the support. I appreciate the super chat. All right, we're getting Eats Eating on. Welcome, my friend. Can we get a picture? Can we see your face? I've seen your face before, man. Come on, my brother. Show your face.
I'll go and comb my hair and come back then. I'll let someone on.
Whatever you want to bring up, just feel free to.
I was going to just look up the going around the Kaaba thing, because I believe that I was going to check something, but I believe that the Hebrew word for Hajj, which is Hag, involves going around a certain place as well. The Catholics as well, they go, I believe I was going to just go and research this and return. But I believe that this going around a holy place was done by the Israelites.
It may have been. I'm not closed off to it. In fact, I think that the point is, and I think that Apostate Prophet would agree, is that the idea of the Kaaba, the place that is particularly Islamic, right? That didn't exist back in Abraham's day, but that this ritual of temple, going around the temple, these particular practices may have been picked up in the region, because we do have Christians, we do have Jews that may be practicing some of this stuff, and potential pagans that are running around, creating what we see as the Islamic narrative. But I don't.
I would say.
I think you're.
I would like to say, as a response to that, very quickly, it's very much possible that that the Jewish tradition and Jewish history actually has such a concept and has such a word that is connected to a holiday or to circumambulation. I know that I know that the word Hajj has something similar in Hebrew, a similarity in Hebrew which corresponds to certain traditional Hebrew celebrations and practices, which is no surprise because the Arabic language and Arab culture is not necessarily a distinct ethnicity and culture. It is rather a melting pot of certain Semitic cultures and cultural practices which gathered on this Arabian Peninsula and formed as a distinct culture. So it is completely normal that this Arabian culture and the Arabic language adopted certain things which existed in other Semitic cultures, such as the Hebrew culture. And it is
but we could also have that the other way around as well, that the Hebrews, for example, when we have Moses leaving Egypt to go to well, it must have been Arabia, I think, where he met Jethro. He worked for Jethro was it Jethro, his father-in-law, who was a priest at a certain place. It could have been a Kaaba-like place. The phylacteries that the Jews have on their hands, they tie on their, it's a little cube anyway. It could have represented something that Moses saw in Arabia, and Moses is supposed to return to. I mean, this is of course on the premise that Moses existed, but let's just assume that. Well, we could say that it's not just the Muslims, Muhammad and his followers taking things from the Christians and Jews, but even prior to that, we had a whole tradition of people taking from each other.
Of course. Well, the issue is we have a large prevalence of a large presence of Kaaba-like temples throughout Arabia at the time of Islam and before Islam. We even have Islamic books about that. We have an Islamic book, a book from Islamic history called the Book of Idols, in which it is mentioned that there were many such Kaabas and certain temples in this region. We have certain cubes. We still have one that still stands today in Iran, which is a Zoroastrian temple. So the shape of a cube, which represents a place of worship or a place of significant gathering, is quite familiar to these cultures. It might have been that these cultures exchanged and interacted with each other. The problem is that Arabic as a language and Arabian as a culture is not something that we can trace very far back. It's not very old, especially compared to the Hebrew culture. So and it could be that these cultures took from each other, but we simply do not have any evidence to support the idea that the Moses whom we have in the biblical narrative actually ever went to what we call Arabia, or what would be called Arabia, Yemen in the past, which is the southern part of Arabia.
Well, then we have to say, where did he go? I mean, it's
very simple. In the Bible, it is very often mentioned that people would go to a wilderness, or the wilderness of Paran, or around the Sinai.
Paran? Where is Paran?
It is thought to be around the Sinai Peninsula. It's
Arabia. It's actually
it's the northern part. It is right.
It is not just the Sinai. Okay. It is also part of Arabia, southern southern area that you're talking about, south of Jerusalem.
It's not really Arabia.
Area of it also includes. It does also include the area of Mecca.
It's not the entire Arabian Peninsula, what the desert of Paran refers to.
No, it's not. It's not. You're right.
It's a wilderness, which is frequently mentioned in the Bible, including in one part it is mentioned that somebody flees from Edom to Egypt and passes through the desert of Paran. Is it reasonable to conclude? We just talked about this with David Wood the other day. Is it reasonable to conclude that somebody fled from Edom, which is right in the region of Palestine, flees down to Arabia and then from there to Egypt? It's unreasonable. The direct path would be to pass through the Sinai Peninsula and to flee to Egypt. Similarly, the desert of Paran is mentioned very frequently together with other locations, which are all in that region to the north, and it was historically placed at around the Jordan, south of Jerusalem, in that region. Nobody would have ever thought that it is way down there in the southern or central parts of Arabia.
We do have mention of a valley of Baca in the Bible. And we also have, interesting enough, in the
that's
Quran.
exactly what AP was actually just talking about, was this valley
Okay.
claim. Yeah.
I missed that. I'm sorry. But in the Quran, we have Mecca being referred to by two names. It was referred to as Bakka and also by Mecca. Bakka, it refers to the name Bakka when it's as an old name, when it's talking about Abraham.
Okay.
And then the more modern name, when it refers to more recent things happening, it's called Mecca. So
where is Becca mentioned in the Bible?
The value of Becca, I think it's in the is it in Isaiah or the Psalms? I think it's in Isaiah. It's translated as, some versions keep true to the actual. This is one of the problems of translations. This is why the Muslims don't like translating the Quran, because you lose a lot. And when it's translated into English, it's called the Valley of Tears, and
or the Valley of Weeping, or the Valley of Trees.
Yeah, sorry, it's the Valley of Weeping. And interesting enough, the Valley of Weeping, why is it called the Valley of Weeping? I think some of the Talmudic, the Jewish scholars or rabbis have said it's called. It could be one of the possibilities is that when Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, she was in the wilderness, in the Paran. I'm not sure actually if you're she was in the wilderness.
I see where you're going. How do you get this idea?
Her weeping, and while she was weeping, an angel came to her and said, "Do not weep. Your son will be the father of 12."
Issues. The Bible also refers to places that are a place of great sadness or a place of joy. How do you get the idea that a certain thing within the Bible, just because it says weeping, for example, or because it's the only refers to Mecca?
Okay, it's the only possible, and it's the only viable. It's the only reasoned. It is the only actual.
Why?
Place? No, it is the only. There's no other alternative. Why? Because it's the only actual place that anyone has ever pinpointed it to. No one has given an alternative.
The scholarly consensus is very clear that it is a place in the Palestine region, and that it refers to a valley, most probably a valley in which a fight has taken place, because the root word is also mentioned in 1 Samuel, for example. How do you get the idea that it definitely refers to Mecca?
Because it is supposed to be a place named one of the sons of the eldest sons of the Ishmael. What was it?
Where do you find that? It doesn't say that anywhere.
It's because I think David would go. There's a place that David. I was going to try and go and research.
There's no connection between David and the Valley of Becca anywhere in the Bible. Where do you get that from?
He went to a place where the Jews, where the Israelites would pass on their way to the Promised Land.
Okay. Where do you get that from?
I think it's in Isaiah, or it could be the Psalms. If you want, keep me on hold for a bit while I check it out.
Let me tell you. I was just asking you questions just to get something out of there. Actually, I already have the answer to this whole issue. The Valley of Becca is not called the Valley of Becca or Becca in the Bible. It's called the Valley of Bahai in the Bible, and it's only one of many such place names that are based on certain attributes of places, or certain trees, or certain emotions. It just happens to be one of them. Muslims generally pick this out because on a plain reading, on a not even on a transliteration, on a Latin reading, it looks like it could be referring to Mecca or Becca, but it has actually nothing to do with it. The actual Hebrew says Bahai, which is very distinct from Mecca. The problem with this is in Psalms 84, what it describes as the Valley of Bahai is a valley that the Korahites who wrote this psalm, not David, the Korahites who wrote this psalm and who miss Zion, which is the house of God, the place of God, who missed this place, they describe that people on their way to appear before Zion pass through the valley of Baha, and through their emotions, through their joy or their sadness, make this place a spring, and the rain makes it, fills it with joy. And we know that Zion in those times and long before referred to one certain place, which is Mount Zion, Jerusalem. And at that time already, to the center of Jerusalem, where the Jewish place of the Jewish center of worship is. David, before this, according to the biblical narrative, brought the Ark of the Covenant to the center of Jerusalem, and Zion basically became the place where people appear before God. So if you look at the narrative and if you look at the consistency of the Bible, you clearly see that this is a place which is before Jerusalem, that people walked through or passed through on their way before they appear before God. There is no reason at all to connect this to the Kaaba, except for accepting Islam as true and relying solely on the Islamic narrative.
But what you just said is very odd, because as the Israelites were heading for the Promised Land, there was no Jerusalem. It hasn't been built. Jerusalem is not a desert place, so it couldn't be the wilderness. And I believe that in the book of Deuteronomy, it says that the desert being spoken of is beyond the Jordan Valley.
You're talking about the desert of Paran. It has nothing to do with the valley
in Arabia, between Paran and I think another place called Topai. It gives, I think it's in Deuteronomy 1:1. Also, we hear about
and where are these places? Where are all these places?
This is it. Where we cannot trust that. We cannot trust.
Why not? We have most of the locations.
Well, I'll tell you why.
They're all in that region.
If you let me finish, I'll explain to you why we can't trust what we think we know. Because Mount Sinai isn't the Mount Sinai that is in the Sinai Peninsula. People, I think most of the scholars are now, most archaeologists, most biblical scholars are agreed that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. It's in somewhere in Arabia. So if Mount Sinai is in Arabia, then that logically means that as you move from Mount Sinai, which is Arabia, to the Promised Land, Jerusalem, you are going to pass another place in Arabia, Paran.
Let me guess. Mount Sinai is in Mecca?
No, Mount Sinai is not in Mecca. I don't know where Mount Sinai is, but
then why do you place
Sinai, Mount Sinai, according to the best information we have at the moment, is in Saudi Arabia. I don't know exactly where, but it's in Arabia. And if you're moving from Mount Sinai, you are going to be in Arabia, passing through the Arabian wilderness, one of the Arabian wildernesses. And Paran, in this case, we should accept what the logical place would be. It would be Mecca, which the Muslims have referred to as Becca. You might say Becca, but there could be.
I have two questions. Why did we get to? Why are we talking about the desert of Paran? We were just talking about the Valley of Becca. That's question number one.
Well,
and question number two is Kaaba between Edom and Egypt?
Well, are we talking about a straight line? We're not talking about a straight line. We are, according to the narrative that the Christians, which you seem to be very close with, although you're not a Christian, so I don't know why you're listening to them, with David Wood. But the Christians and the Jews say that, and the Muslims actually, they say that the Israelites were moving around that area. They weren't going from A to B. It wasn't a straight line. It was 40 years. I mean, if you're going to accept the 40-year thing, they were going around in circles. So
it depends on the source. It does depend on the source that you're looking at on this whole 40 years thing, if you get technical. And also, there's Mount Horeb. So we don't even know what mountain that supposedly he was on. Was it Mount Horeb or was it Mount Sinai? We don't even know, guys. That's the problem when you get into the textual criticism. But I do have one question before I let you go, Eats Eating, and this is a simple one, I think. What would you say as a Muslim, the Jews that never look at the Kaaba, they never consider this place sacred, they don't worship it, through all the history, biblically speaking, or even going down in the first century, what do you think happened? Do you think that they apostatized and stopped going to the true place of worship? I mean, were they wrong? When did they stop going to the right place and start going to the wrong one?
Why would the Jews go to the Kaaba? Sorry, not the Jews. Why would the Israelites go to the Kaaba? It was.
Isn't that where Abraham set up the place? I mean, isn't that where Abraham?
No. Well, let's be careful here. Abraham and who set it up with him?
Ishmael.
Yeah, Ishmael.
Abraham and Ishmael. So it's a different part of the family. We are according to the
places of worship now.
Does that matter? That doesn't matter to the Quran. Doesn't the Quran say that Abraham invited mankind to the Kaaba, and don't the traditions say that Abraham did invite mankind, and people came from distant passes from all around the world to the Kaaba? Why does it now matter that Jews have a separate belief, which is not even something that Islam was properly aware of? You
seem to like jumping from the Bible then to the Quran, which I admit I have done as well.
No, I mean we're connecting. But according to that's what you're doing,
but that's what you're doing, so I'm doing it as well. So according to the Quran, there was a place of invitation. People could come, or they could decide not to go. So if we look at the Bible, jump back to the Bible, we are told in the Bible that there was enmity between Sarah, who seemed to be jealous of Hagar. Now that's not found in the Quran. In the Quran, they're both Isaac and Ishmael and Sarah and Hagar. They're all noble people. We don't see the jealousy there. However, according to interesting enough, even the Bible at the end says that Ishmael and Isaac got together and they buried their father. So there seemed to be some sort of peace and friendship with them at the end. Anyway, back to why the Jews don't go to the Kaaba. The enmity that was had according from the Jewish side, the Israelite side against Isaac, the not wanting to share the inheritance or whatever. Why would they go to the place that Ishmael had set up with his father? Because
it was set up by Abraham, and Abraham was given the task according to the Quran to invite the entire world.
Okay, but you like to ignore the Bible when it suits you. The Bible.
Don't you believe in the Quran?
I believe in the Quran, and it was invited, and they were invited to come, and we know that Isaac and Ishmael did meet up to bury their father.
So you are saying that the Hebrew people who were guided by Allah as his chosen people according to the Quran, who had all the prophets and the books which came from the legacy, from the descendants of Abraham, that all these prophets, rightly guided by Allah, completely together with the Jews out of enmity, ignored.
No, I'm not saying that. There is no enmity. Sorry. You're twisting my words, apostate.
Your words don't make any sense.
The sense is the Quran says they were invited to come. They're not forced to come. The Bible tells you in plain language.
The Quran says that Abraham was told.
Why are you ignoring the Bible? Why ignoring the Bible? I'm telling you what the Quran says. I'm telling you what the Quran says and what the Bible says. The Quran says people were invited.
You just said, why is he going to the Bible? And then you said you're telling him what the Bible says too. I'm telling him both.
I am telling him both without closing my mind. He is closing his mind to the Bible when it suits him and closing his mind to the Quran. So let's go through it again. Let's go through it. AP. He definitely is.
Let me tell you what it says. Let me tell you what it says in Quran chapter 22, verse 27. It says, or let me begin from Quran 22, verse 26, and read 22, 27 right after that. It says, "And remember when we assigned to Abraham the site of the house, the Kaaba, saying, 'Do not associate anything with me in worship, and purify my house for those who circle it and stand in prayer and bow and prostrate themselves.'" It says in 27. and proclaim to the people the pilgrimage. They will come to you on foot and on every lean camel. They will come from every distant pass. It further goes on to describe how this then happened, and these practices were, restored and proclaimed to mankind of sacrificing animals and making pilgrimage around the Kaaba. So the Quran says, proclaim it to mankind. This is Abraham's mission. And you are saying that the Hebrew people, that the Israelites, did not do this because of some conflict, and all the prophets mentioned in the Hebrew.
No, I'm not saying that.
Are also
I'm not saying
in the Quran.
No.
Do this.
No, please don't twist my words. I'm not saying that they did it or they didn't do it. I'm saying that according to Quran, that they were invited.
It doesn't say
whether they did
invited
it or not. What does it say? It says they came. People came.
They came, then they came. They weren't just invited. They came.
Well, then they came, and they were invited to continue coming. We know that Isaac and Ishmael, from the Bible, buried their father, so that they did meet at some point. So they were of the same sort of
because they were brothers.
They were brothers, and why would a Jew allow? Well, they weren't called Jews then. Why would a monotheist allow a non-monotheist to bury their father? They must have had a religion. They must have had a religion in common if they both came together to bury the father of monotheism.
Okay, so nobody made the claim that Ishmael was a polytheist. Why are we talking about this?
So there we have. They're both monotheist. So there would have been no reason why Isaac would not have gone. It doesn't say specifically they came or they didn't come, but we know that mankind came. So perhaps I'm not going to say they definitely came, though the chances are that if they didn't meet up every now and then, one of them would go to their home, the other one would go to the other one's home. If one of them went to bury their father, then they probably had some network where they met up every now and then. So you cannot say that that Isaac never visited Ishmael, because we know from the Bible that they visited to bury their father. So if you want to say they never came, that's up to you. That
is a bit unrelated to the topic. I don't want to misrepresent you, but are you basically saying that? Are you basically saying that the Kaaba did indeed play some role, and that Isaac and Ishmael did meet up because they were united in their minds?
The Bible says.
But we also
let him finish. So go ahead, AP.
But we also, but it is also a fact that the Israelites, the Hebrew people, the chosen people, the guided people, according to the Quran, rightly guided by Allah, together with all the prophets for thousands of years, did not care about the Kaaba at all, despite the fact that the Quran says that Allah gave Abraham the mission to proclaim this to mankind, so that they come from all around the world, as it is today.
You know what's amazing? Real quick, I want to do this before I unmute Eats Eating. Is the Jews and the Samaritans, right? This goes way back. We have actual documentation. We have legitimate extra biblical circumstances that we can look at the sources and say, okay, they're arguing over, is it Mount Gerizim, which is way away from anything close to Mecca, okay? And then Jerusalem. Those are it. And then you have this strange cultic practice in Elephantine by the Jewish people who built a temple that's down in Egypt, but they're not across the peninsula and they're not in Arabia. They're in Egypt. So you have these three places that are disputed, and a lot of even Greek sources in 3rd century BCE are saying they had this myth of Moses where they said Moses left Egypt and he went north, and he, of course, this isn't, we don't know any of the historical veracity of these things, but this seems to be a myth that he built Jerusalem, right? Moses is the one who built Jerusalem. So we have the biblical sources that go way older, but we're supposed to trust 7th century CE sources, and everyone, extra biblical, doesn't matter. None of that, all of that's like sidestepped, and there's just like strange Ishmaelite movement that had this tradition that only gets written down in the 7th century CE. So everything you say is moot. It doesn't matter. But anyway, Eats Eating, you're unmuted.
You said a lot there. Some of it's really confusing. Moses didn't build Jerusalem. I think it was David who built Jerusalem.
The point I'm making is, what I'm trying to say is the tradition that goes way back way older than 7th century BC or AD, I'm sorry, shows that the house of the Lord, which the Quran mentions the house of the Lord and wants to connect that to the Kaaba, the house of the Lord was actually Jerusalem by southern Judah Israelites, right? And the other people want to argue, no, it's north. It's in Mount Gerizim, which is even further north in Samaria. So here you have two houses that are disputed. Mecca's never even a dispute. You would think if it was even a rivalry, if it was even a thing on the map that was a concern at all, even if it was a competing area, they would have said, hey, watch out for Mecca down south. This is the true place of worship. Screw that place down here. It's not even mentioned like that. And that's the problem that we're trying to point out. We don't have clear evidence. We have strange stuff that's being like you're squeezing a grain out of a gnat to say, well, there was a Valley of the Tears, which sounds like Baka, which might mean this or that. And that's the point I think that Apostate Prophet is trying to say.
But
did I accurately say that?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's just we don't have any proper evidence to support any of these things. I mean, we have gone through several pieces of evidence when it comes to the narrative of the Kaaba. They are all quite weak, unfounded. They crumble, and we jump from evidence to evidence to go to the next evidence with hopes that it will somehow confirm the Islamic claim for no reason other than that we have to accept Islamic narratives as true.
We don't have to accept the Islamic narratives. We can accept the Bible itself, who said that the Israelites were roaming around the wilderness. Now, the Jordan Valley, the place for Palestine, Israel, that is not a wilderness. I mean, Sinai.
Why did Muhammad say to bow toward Jerusalem and then it changed to Mecca? Why would he do that? Why is Jerusalem even a place you face? Originally, it makes no sense to me why that would even be a thing.
There were right next in, like, if you were Muhammad and you were at the Kaaba, right next to all 360 statues, I don't think you'd really want to go and bow to a statue, because the statues were outside and the statues are inside. If you're a Muslim, you're not going to bow down in front of an idol, are you? I mean, that would just. I mean, it's bad enough now. It's bad enough now that. Well, hold on. Can I finish? It's bad enough now that Christians, not Jews, but Christians, accuse the Muslims of bowing down to an idol, the house, like Apostate is doing. So talking about birds pooing on it and things like that. It's bad enough that they think that Muslims are bowing down to the house, a deity. How would it look if there were actual idols outside and you were bowing down towards that? So that doesn't have a really good look, does it? Now, Derek, be honest. Also, you mentioned the Samaritan text, and in your Bible, the main Bible we have now, the Jews read, it says that Ishmael would be a wild ass of a man. His hand will be against every man. But if you look at the Samaritan text, we have a different reading. We have his hand will be for every man. So he will be a friendly man. His hand will be open.
Are you saying the Samaritans are supporting the Islamic narrative in terms of?
They don't. Of course not. They're not supporting anyone. They've just got a different reading. They see Ishmael as a friend to the world, as a person. So he would be inviting people to come to his home, where we say that the Kaaba was built, and we know that.
Look! I just eats eating. I've got to let you go. I want to make room to have other people come on to talk. I really do appreciate you coming on and being kind and having a fun dialogue back and forth. Let's do this again, my friend.
Okay, I'll try to, but I just want to make a comment about some of the guests you've had. This is an interesting one. It's actually doing what you're supposed to. What
this is about Zara K, honestly, I don't want to hear what you have to say.
No. What you're doing here is you are looking at the myths and you're trying to work out if myths are true or not. Not Zara K. Zara had a really I could empathize with her story, talking about some other people you've had on, who after listening to some people, it's like I'm not saying that the apostate here has done that. He's actually looking at the myths, but some of your guests, they are just looking at ugliness all the time, and it's dehumanizing Muslims. And the situation in India, where Muslims are being all around the world, actually in Burma, in China, where Muslims, I know that in Muslim countries, people like people like apostates are, and homosexuals and things are persecuted. But to
and you don't agree with that?
Of course not. Dehumanizing Muslims in this time, especially.
And what guest am I bringing on in particular that's doing the dehumanizing of Muslims?
The one who's got no name. The
You're talking about the apostate imam?
Yeah, I mean, you say that it's not dehumanizing Muslims; it's dehumanizing Islam. And whenever some of these groups in India, especially, whenever they see a Muslim, they see a beef eater, a cow killer, and they actually string them up in the streets. It's happened a lot, and the government seem to do nothing about it except put garlands around their heads. And anyway, I'm just asking you to be, do this sort of thing. And Robert Price, he says he loves religions, he loves Islam. After watching people like Apostate Imam, it's like there's nothing to love in this religion at all. I mean, why would anyone become a Muslim? That there must be something wrong with them. But anyway, I'll let you get on with. I
appreciate you, and until next time. All right, so I'm sorry for the long-windedness there. We got some super chats real quick. Stop Scamming Man, thank you so much for the super chat. If folks came to the Kaaba from all over the world, there would be people that didn't return or otherwise had kids on the way there or back, and people DNA would show it from Native America to Australia. Well, obviously, that's assuming a larger world, I think, than they had in mind in antiquity. But thank you for the super chat for sure, though. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's very much in agreement with what I say. I mean, you would find traces of this practice, of this place in human history, in anthropology. I mean, we have things that are so much more obscure, for which we have abundance of sources, but we have nothing, literally nothing about the Kaaba from before the emergence of Islam, and we have nothing that comes close to the word Mecca until just a century before Islam's emergence. It was an unimportant little desert that was still unimportant and is still unimportant if it wasn't for the Kaaba. So
interesting. Thank you. Sid Dave says, why would Allah make Israelites the chosen people, but then build a house of Allah, not in Israel, but 1,500 miles away in Saudi Arabia? Allah is crazy. That's what he said. But you could tell, though, in the response from Eats Eating, what he's trying to do is separate the line by showing, well, it's Ishmael. And then that's why I was saying, like, the evidence is so scant to try and strain what it's actually trying to say biblically. It's like taking sources you don't really have for and assuming this has been going on since way back then, and we just don't have that evidence. In fact, what evidence we do have that's contemporaneous to the 7th century-ish, 5th, 6th, 7th, doesn't look anything like what you would expect. It's got Christian and Jewish and pagan stuff going on. So
he's connecting different puzzles from within the Bible to create himself a narrative, jumping from evidence to evidence, bringing in entirely unrelated things. I mean, every evidence that we have, if we analyze it, crumbles. And it's a little bit, I mean, it's hopeless to jump just to the next evidence and to try to make something from that.
Thank you. If Abraham, and thank you for the super chat, had really done this, wouldn't Joseph have revived the practice when granted sweeping power in Egypt? Wouldn't there be evidence as well? Interesting points.
I mean, there are so many. It's the Quran establishes the whole history of the Israeli prophets, the Israelite prophets, the Hebrew prophets, as the rightly guided people. It mentions them as the prophets who were sent by Allah to guide humanity. It doesn't have Arabian prophets who have their own books. It bases its entire legacy on the whole biblical Abrahamic tradition and narrative.
Except it wants to divorce all of the potential. If you're looking at the geographical locations, they're actually north. They're up there towards where we have modern day Israel, and of course along the coastlands and whatnot. And then they go south into slavery in Egypt, according to the narrative. They don't go from Saudi Arabia, because remember, God tells Abraham, go to this place, this land. I'm giving you this land, right? It's the region in which this land is being granted is not Saudi Arabia. That's not where he's promised the promised land that's given to Abraham, where his seed would go on and on, all of these promises. That's up there. So you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and we're finding out you're taking away all of Peter's narrative, which we have way older evidence for, assuming a conspiracy, so to speak, that there's something else going on. I appreciate that. Greg says, and what do Muslims do to apostates? Well, apostate prophet can tell you, and you live in a free country, so even then you've had death threats and stuff. But oftentimes
Islam itself directly dehumanizes us.
Right.
That's all there is to say about it.
So if you're speaking against Islam and a Muslim hears it, like our friend Eats Eating, he thinks it's dehumanizing because you're saying don't practice Islam, and that's where the whole Islamophobe idea comes up, where they want to go, you're an Islamophobe, or what they mean to say is you're a bigot against Muslims. But really, it's the practice and the religion that you're seeing problems with. Even if there are peaceful, loving ones that are out there that practice these things, they're peaceful, loving Christians. And you also have the Ku Klux Klan. And imagine if the Ku Klux Klan took over 5 states in the United States, forcefully, as a political movement combined with its religious ideologies. You might start putting a red flag on this and going, what's going on here? But I've, personally, I'm an atheist, and I think you identify as an atheist. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I am technically an atheist. I just don't really advertise myself as an atheist. No.
Right. We're happy. We don't need a religion, and I feel content. David the Goliath, thank you for the super chat. He says Muslim societies practice religious what is this? Apartheid? I hope I'm saying that right.
What? Apartheid?
Only 3 Muslim majority countries allow marriages between non-Muslim men and Muslim women. They implement a religious version of Jim Crow laws. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Allow marriages between non-Muslim. It's a general Muslim thing. It's an Islamic law. It's this is Islamic. In Islam, according to Islam, a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Muslim woman, a Jewish woman, or a Christian woman, but a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a non-Muslim man. So this has been the law accordingly forever.
Interesting. All right, we got one more super chat, and then I send in this link right now before I even pull up the super chat.
There's nobody else?
Yeah, I know nobody jumped on. I know there's somebody out there that must be a Muslim that would be interested in coming on and having a friendly conversation. As you can see, we're open to these conversations, and I think that goes a long way for your credibility, AP, because you may disagree and they may not like you. They may not like what you say, whatever, but you're actually willing to conversate with people.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, and that's something I respect about you, is that you're willing to have these conversations, and you actually debate. I don't. I like to have conversations, though. And I'm not interested in formal, let's, my thing's bigger than your thing.
Well, nobody wants to debate me. The reason that I want to have debates is I don't like bragging. I don't want to win. I don't want to humiliate. I don't want any of that nonsense. The reason I want to have structured debates is that nobody tries to take over the conversation, and we all have our own time, our rules, and we make our points and then leave it to the audience. That's what I want. Unfortunately, nobody wants to debate me. I don't know why.
Huh. Well, I don't blame you for that, because the last time I had some Muslims jump on, a lot of comments came later, messages to me, they will want to overpower the conversation to a point where it's nobody gets a word in, except I gotta tell you. I had a dude call the other guy a Taliban, and found out they're both Muslims, and I'm the atheist on the channel, and I was I was the good guy to both teams, but they were enemies with each other. And I was like, damn, a civil war happening on MythVision. Ahmed Fazil, thank you, or Fazli, I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you for the super chat. I left Islam thanks to AP. Couldn't be happier.
I am very happy for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, is anyone else interested in coming and having a conversation with AP while we're here on MythVision? Jojo, you're in the place down here, but it says you're not connected. Device is not connected. I don't know if you're just listening through here or not, but I don't think you're a Muslim either, though. So that's another thing. I'm interested in Muslims. Is there anyone who dare to challenge? I don't know if that even spices me. I'm trying to hype it up, get people to come in. No,
yeah. I mean, it's a thing to make comments. It's a whole different deal to actually try to defend your beliefs, and it's not me. It is the topic. Yeah. It's the topic of the Kaaba and of trying to justify that. I've had just somebody the other day on Pine Creek's channel. A Muslim came on who was admittedly a reformist Muslim. He had a different view of things, but he openly admitted to me, he said he does believe that the Kaaba is this house of Allah, this universal place, and that its historicity is true. Mm-hmm. But in the end, as I poked through the evidence and through his beliefs, he did admit to me that he doesn't have any evidence besides the Quran, and that he trusts the evidence because he trusts the Quran,
right?
And that's where you eventually get, and it's very unstable. It's hard to defend.
What always happens, yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what I'm finding with all the faiths that I'm poking into. Is it is a faith-based thing. Yeah. Definitely something there. If you don't mind, how do you feel about if you had an opportunity to say something to Hamza's Den, and let's suppose they didn't cut you off, right? After all that you've said in the conversation you had, what would you say since that happened now, based on knowing about the Kaaba? What would you like to finish off saying to them?
What I would like to say to them is, first off, they should stop trying to be so aggressive and just listen and try to have a discussion, try to have a conversation, because it's a very bad look on you and your religion if you are seen on camera in front of thousands of people yelling at somebody just because he's nicely and calmly asking questions. I mean, the reflections of that are becoming very obvious. And what I want to say is that they should be open to discussing the actual evidence, discussing actual information, and allowing their opponent to present a certain perspective, present certain evidence, without immediately jumping to the conclusion that the opponent is a hypocrite or dishonest or ignorant or a liar just because they do not accept your evidence, which you don't really have proper foundations on. The entire claim that Mecca is mentioned in the Bible as the Valley of Baca is a very shaky, very terrible argument that can be debunked very easily, which I will come to, and I would have loved to done that. I would love to do that in a discussion or in a debate. In fact, I'm still open to that. But people really need to be more open to, changing their minds and having their minds challenged if they want to build a place called the Arena and actually invite people who challenge them.
Good point. I'm wondering if their intention is to have like combat type of ideas instead of like cordial, decent, calm, respectable, sophisticated, educated, maybe conversations. I don't know. I want to have that here, but obviously we don't have any PhDs on this particular subject here. It's just, I have two things in mind, and I'd like your thoughts about this. I like to interview ex-Muslims. A lot of them aren't experts. They might have come from a certain version or a particular region of the world where Islam is practiced a certain way. And you might go, that's not Islam. And you're like, well, you're from a different region. So maybe you are a different version, or you just don't realize that's what they dealt with. So they're speaking their own experience as to why they escaped what was harmful for them and have found freedom and happiness. Like actual joy. Yeah. I know people watching this, but you're an atheist. You can't be happy. You can't actually have joy. You can't be really seriously, sincerely pleased with life. And it's like, yeah, people not telling me I'm going to hell and actually thinking I might, there's a freedom in that and not having that over your shoulders. So
that's a very ridiculous thing to do. I mean, it's like trying to make big claims and assertions about how your mind works, and if your mind doesn't work the way that you think your mind works, then you shouldn't think at all. I mean, they are trying to discuss the meta of what you feel and why you do certain things, and then trying to make a point, an assertion over that, and trying to dictate your feelings and your morals and your whole life to you based on their biased perspective on the meta of the things that you feel and perceive. It's just it's ridiculous. I mean, we can have endless arguments on how you define happiness, how you define feelings, whether we should be happy or not, how you define morality. It's all besides the point. I mean, you are obviously happy with yourself. I am happy with myself. Let's forget about that. Let's discuss the truth claims that we are confronted with. And the issue with the ex-Muslims, with inviting ex-Muslims, you have them on. It's very good of you, very great of you to give ex-Muslims a platform, to let them express themselves. Many people are very shy of doing that because of the possible backlash. The atheist community, unfortunately, is very poor in keeping up with this thing. With this in inviting ex-Muslims and criticizing Islam, daring to say something critical about Islam. Yeah. And of course, the people that you invite are people who have experienced Islam and who therefore then speak about it from their perspective. It's not like they all claim to be scholars, claim to be students of knowledge. You have people come here and express their views, and they might say certain things that are not entirely in agreement with the scholarly consensus on a certain matter. They can then apologize for that, take it back. You can criticize them for that, but so be it. I mean, the claim is not to bring on giant scholars who will change the world.
I have a super chat and I want to get this. Thank you, the African Humanist. I really appreciate you. She's a sweetheart, and I think you have a YouTube channel. I hope everyone goes subscribe to her for sure. But she's been making rounds, and I've seen her a lot here on MythVision. Before we ask this question, though, I want to make one point about the whole thing I brought up with Zara. Right, the people who are criticizing this morning Zara's idea about the rapist marrying the woman and whatnot. The guy, this was the tactics that were used in the Twitter feed post that kept on going, was, she told a lie, right? What are you going to do about it? And how do you see her? And are you going to call her out? And like, why am I not attacking Zara? Because she's not an imam or an expert, and even admits that she comes from a more liberal type of Islam that isn't strict. Her parents stood by her side during this entire situation, and she's posted things that are obviously blasphemy to some Muslims and whatnot. Like, she goes above and beyond, right? And her family still supports her. Well, that's not typical if you go to a more strict Muslim family. Right. And I said that to say, I thought to myself, their expectations, what do they want me to do to them? Because as soon as let's say they have a belief that is not true, and they say it's true, and I could show, okay, here's some holes in what you believe and why it's wrong. You're now a liar because you say this is the truth, but it's not. Now, do I call you out and do I shame you and do I do this and do I do that to you because for some reason your beliefs may not be factual? They're based off tradition. They're based off faith. They're based off of text by, however you want to put it. I'm not going to sit here and bash you or try to say you're a horrible individual because you believe. Even the gentleman who came on eats eating. He believes. If he's wrong about this, I'm not accusing him because he believes something, right?
Yeah, are we going to call him a liar now because he said something wrong? Yeah.
No, and that's why I'm saying they're hypocritical. Do they want me to do that to them all day long? I mean, no, and they have all the time in the world. So
yeah. That's the thing that people generally resort to, who are very hateful about what we are doing, to pick out something that we say which may or may not be wrong, and then to try to, based on that, entirely dismiss us and throw us into under the bus as complete liars who can never be trusted again.
Yeah, you say one thing that isn't perfectly factual.
Yeah,
they grab it, and then that's their little. Oh, one time he said there were 13 apostles. We know that's not the case because there was only 12, and it's like, really, dude? Like, yeah, that's what they look for. They're looking for anything. I bet you they're going to look at this video. They're going to find something about you, and they're going to post it on Twitter. Anyway, I had to block anyone who's a troll. So, can I ask what's in the Kaaba and why the need?
There is actually it's Kaaba, but that's fine. There is it is empty. There are pictures online of it. Muslims generally do not care about what's inside of it, just what it represents. But the inside is empty. There is nothing of significance. There are just three pillars standing in there, and there is a table looking like an altar. Not sure what it's used for, and there are certain frames like on the walls that say Allah or this and that. And then there is just there are stairs that go up to the top of the Kaaba for cleaning purposes, but that's it. It is empty. It's served. This is also funny. It's served in the time before Islam as a house for the idols, which the pre-Islamic polytheists worshipped and revered. So it actually had a function, and the people would then circumambulate this house and worship and show their respect to these gods and the gods that are above them. For the Islamic people, the function as a house is completely useless.
Interesting. Another super chat says, and thank you for the super chat. It says, if you believe there is God and if you believe there is no God, you're in the same boat. You believe something you not know. I mean, technically, yeah. I mean, this gets into that negative argument, prove a negative, and can't prove a negative. But I mean, I guess we're kind of all in the same boat. I think not knowing for me has helped my life in a lot of ways, and going, I have good enough reasons to say this literature and that literature isn't actually factual, but then again, that's going into another topic. So
yeah, I mean, it has given me great pleasure to stop pretending like I have to know the truth about everything. It is completely, because it's like, I mean, look at the history of humankind. Nobody has ever come out and ended the discussion and said, hey, you know what, here it is, and I will show you why, and boom. Nobody has ever done that. People are on this constant struggle to explain the objective meaning of life, to explain the origin, to explain the creator and what happens after death and this and that. And it is, as Albert Camus describes it, an absurdity which gives humans just more suffering. The best thing you could do is to simply embrace the fact that you will not find something, that you will not get somewhere with a certain struggle for a truth claim to make. All you can do is to be skeptical of nothing that you can prove, and to accept things that you can for certain find out and verify.
Thank you. Jojo, you want to come on and defend the Muslims for a second, and I think you muted yourself. Feel free to go ahead and say what you wanted to say. Hopefully you can unmute it. We're waiting for you to unmute so you could share what you had to say. I think we agree there. Jojo, you're on. What's up? All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
I'm sorry, it's evening.
We can barely hear you. And did you have a particular statement you wanted to make, or?
Yes, I wanted to say something to Apostate Prophet, and I appreciate your show.
Thank you.
I have a question. We know that the places in the current situation. Oh no, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you very well. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to speak up.
You know the places in the Bible. It isn't called Egypt. It's called Mizraim. Is there true evidence that Mizraim is Egypt?
I mean, I never went into trying to find out whether the Egypt that is described in the Bible is actually Egypt. As many other people, we generally accept this as common knowledge. It also corresponds with a lot of things that the Bible says about Egypt. So, no, I wouldn't say I've ever personally verified that.
I know another guy that maybe you can see on YouTube. He's called Ashraf Ezat. He has a theory that the Bible is originally from Arabia. And I find his theory a good theory. He himself is an archaeologist. And he says the stories that are in the Bible, like camels, like Joseph and other things, aren't found in Egypt, but more in Arabia. And he has a whole other theory that I find interesting.
Send me the links when we get. I'm going to go ahead and pop you back off and send me the links in an email. You've got my email, and you can contact me any way possible down in the description. There's always a way to contact me. I'd be happy to look into this, and then we can have further discussion down the road if it's something interesting. But as far as I am at the moment, go ahead, Apostate.
Can I just ask a quick question? Are you a Muslim? Were you born into being a Muslim?
Yes.
Okay, and could it be that you simply accept the opinion of a very fringe scholar because you are a Muslim and that scholar seems to agree with something that would verify your own religious beliefs?
No.
It's not possible?
Is that possible?
I don't accept his theory. I take his theory not for granted, but it's interesting.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm a Dutch guy.
Oh, okay. I like the Dutch language. I don't fully understand it, but that's fine.
So I guess what AP's getting at is an interesting question I always ask myself. Like, in most people who come from a angle push that because that's the side they're trying to kind of defend or say it makes the most sense or whatever. And I've seen you around a long time on my channel. You've commented thousands of videos. I've seen your name, Jojo Freelancer, always come up.
Yes.
But I think oftentimes we do have these biases. We were born, raised, taught at a young age we convert, whatever it might be, or older age we convert, but it's so sacred in it. And this is something that we want to defend, that we somehow do that. But I'm not saying that that's what this is. Send me the content, because honestly, we don't have anything to talk about without researching it and looking into it. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, I'm totally comfortable with consensus scholarship. I talk to PhDs literally every day, and none of them have ever said Egypt isn't what we think of as Egypt coming from the region. If you will, if we're looking at a map, it would be west of the peninsula and not on the side where Arabia is at. Is that correct? Am I getting my east and west mixed up? I think, yeah, west.
Yeah, it's west.
So they're not saying it's at all on the other side. Doesn't mean that Egypt didn't control these regions, because for a millennia they controlled Canaan, and the Canaanites were under their power. So one might say this was Egypt or under the jurisdiction of Egypt, but to argue that that was the location, what we call Egypt, that's a different discussion, and I'd be interested in looking at your resources.
What I would like to add is, just from my little bit of knowledge, is that the Semitic name for Egypt, which is even in Arabic, it's Misr. It's Misr, or in Hebrew it might be Mizr. In older languages it might be something similar. This is not something that I think it's not something that originates from the Hebrew Bible and from Hebrew texts. As far as I know, I could be totally wrong about this, but as far as I know, this is this usage for Egypt is something that predates Hebrew texts and Hebrew history. So,
Ridwan,
I would highly doubt that as a proper theory. But then, as said, it's a very fringe theory, which I don't see any reason to accept. But I would love to always look into fringe theories. Yeah.
What I wanted to say was, I am born in a Muslim family. That's what I say. I know the answer of Derek Lambert, but
I have a hard time understanding you. I'm so sorry, but I know you're being kind, and you're. But you say you come from a Muslim family. Are you a Muslim though?
I'm silent.
Okay. You plead the fifth. You plead the fifth on me. That in the United States, that's when we plead the right to say I don't want to say anymore.
Yes.
Okay, well I respect that. No problem, sir. I appreciate you, Jojo. I'm gonna let you go now, and
Okay. Yes.
and I really do appreciate you. Stop back in sometime.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun and interesting. I mean, thank you for the super chat. I wish to see a show
Not something
on.
I've heard before. Yeah. But.
Yeah, I got people in the chat who are saying, prove that the Misr is the Egypt which we know today. That somehow isn't the region east of the peninsula. But I wish to see a show on Hindu Dharma. Thanks. Well, thank you. I definitely will get there. You got to give me some time because I can only read like 6,000 pages of Islamic literature and scholarship. You know, I can't do everything at once, but give me some time and we'll be getting into all that stuff in time. AP, nobody else wanted a show, man. What did you do? You scared everyone off, man.
No, it's just the Kaaba scared everyone off. I'm really interested in that whole thing right now. I never wondered about the etymology of Egypt. But yeah, no, it's the Kaaba which scares people off. It's not me. It's the Kaaba itself. It's a very hard thing to defend, and I understand them. I mean, I would be scared to come on here and to defend my argument that the Kaaba is indeed this universal temple which was built by Abraham, and the entire world listened to it and came to it. It's hard to do, you know. I don't blame them.
Yeah, and I was reading an article, man. Oh, let's see if I could pull up an image this way. Hold on, we've got someone in the chat now. Thank you, whoever you are. I don't care if when I pop you on here, you disagree all day long. I'm thankful people are joining. So, all right. X, are you a Muslim?
I am indeed.
Awesome. Welcome to MythVision, man. I'm glad we got some Muslims actually joining us today to have a conversation. So, what would you like to say to AP?
Well, to keep it very simple, I think AP is making his case against the hadiths and not what's in the Quran itself.
Interesting. Please tell us more.
But I just talked about the Quran.
Well, let me tell you why. Because nowhere in the Quran does it say that Abraham built the Kaaba. I think the chapter and verse that AP referenced once was in chapter 22, verse 26 or 25, if I remember right.
22, 26, 27, and 28.
Yes. Okay. The word that you have assumed to be Kaaba is Bayt, which is translated as a house. However, okay. I think as you are aware, with all Arabic words, they can have similar meanings, not necessarily different meanings, but it depends on the context which word fits in. So, for instance, when you say Bayt, if you go to chapter 483, you will see that the same word is translated as intention, if you like, to cut a long story short.
Okay.
Intention, objective, etc. So to cut the long story short for you, what Abraham established was basically the objective of the religion. Nothing to do with a physical house. And to prove that to you, in the very same verse that you cited, it says, "And when we appointed for Abraham the place of the house," quote unquote, "that do not you associate partners with me anything." Now, what has associating partners with God got to do with establishing a physical house?
Okay. Can I ask a very quick question? Are you a Quran-only Muslim?
That's what you would call me, yes.
Okay, so yes. So you don't believe in the hadiths. You solely base your Islamic belief on the Quran. Is that right?
Yes. But
Okay.
what I'm trying to establish is that what's in the Quran itself is not what you're making an argument against.
Okay. Well, the issue is in Quran chapter 22, verse 26, it doesn't merely say that according to the traditional text, according to the understanding, it doesn't merely say that Abraham built a house and that's it, or made a bait and that's it. It says much more than that, which is that he was shown the site of the place, of the bait, whatever you want to call it. If we grant for a second that it does not refer to a house, but it would be a very strange thing to grant, because it's a very common word used for house. And it then goes on quoting Allah, saying, "Do not associate anything with me in worship, and purify my bait for those who do tawaf." So it's very, I mean, the text seems to say that Allah gives Abraham a location to build something, and then tells him to tell people, "Do not associate anything with me in worship. Purify that something for those who circle that something and who bow." And in the next verse, it goes on and says, "Call all the people, or proclaim to the people the Hajj, so that they come to you from every distant pass." So it would be very strange, and in my opinion, very far-fetched to conclude that this does not refer to a house, but that this is just, a covenant or something like that.
Well, let me show you why that is the case.
Okay.
Yes, you are right that Abraham was pointed to a particular site.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is very simple, and that is because Abraham left his community because of the idolatry that they used to commit.
Okay.
So Abraham is simply shown another place to set up his religion, which he's now received from God.
Okay.
Now, so with that in mind, it says, "Do not associate any partners with me, and purify my bait." So speaking of purify here, it is simply referring to the fact that people, the others, are committing idolatry and etc. in the name of God. So what Abraham is doing is he's purifying God's faith, basically God's religion.
Okay.
Alternatively, he's cleaning a physical house. Those are the two options there. With that said, the word you've assumed to be tawaf is actually not tawaf at all. The word is lit-ta'ifin. And lit-ta'ifin throughout the Quran simply means a group or people wandering. So either a group or people wandering around throughout the Quran. Let me just finish.
Okay.
And then it gives you the opposite to those lit-ta'ifin, namely wal-qa'imin, which is basically those who live there. So in any community, you will have people who live there, and you will have people who live on the outskirts who may come to visit, and etc. So those are the two that have been referenced. Now the last two, which is mistaken very often, it says warraka'a sujud. It does not say warraka'a was sujud. The difference is people are assuming that it says and bow and prostrate.
Okay.
The word "and" is not there. So if you wish to translate it as bow prostrate, you would have to say bow prostrate, and that wouldn't make sense. So contextually, the only thing that would follow is humbly submit. So in a nutshell, Abraham was shown a site where he is to establish the objective, i.e. the deen, keep it purified for those who live there and those who live around, for those who live there and those who visit, and for those who humbly submit.
And where is that place?
The place is irrelevant.
Okay, but so the issue is that verse 22, verse 26, and 27 are not the only places that we have. I mean, we could go on further, and there are at least 2 or 3 more places in which it is even further explicitly described, which I did not reference because they don't use the same wording about inviting mankind. That's why I consider them irrelevant to the actual argument. But the Quran describes in other parts that Abraham, together with Ishmael, purified the house, and that this was a place of a sanctuary. At one place, it says that the first house built in in
Mecca.
Mecca is the house, is this house for Allah, for mankind.
Yes.
It says again in chapter 2 verse 125, and in other parts of the Quran, it again uses this entire narrative of purifying a house, building a house. It speaks of a location where they stand.
It never
and so
says
on.
building, by the way.
Okay, fine, establish. So the issue is, what you need to do here is to reinterpret the entire narrative and the entire scripture and the entire Quran, and assert that Muslims have completely misunderstood and misrepresented this, and you actually have a completely different idea of what is being said here that is in disagreement with the vast majority of Muslims, because they believe in this.
Right. I mean, I'm not talking about what vast majority of Muslims believe in.
Okay.
Nor am I giving you an interpretation or anything of the sort. I'm giving you things that you can verify from the Quran itself.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of the verses that you spoke about, so these two are one of them, and there's another two. So you're referring to chapter 2, 125, all the way to say 129, something along those lines. And the other one is chapter 3, 96 and 97.
And we also have chapter 5, verse 97, I believe.
Okay, 597 is completely different, or at least it has nothing to do with Abraham. So,
okay.
So as it pertains to Abraham, what I will show you is I will give you the common theme around this quote-unquote house in regards to all of these verses. So number one, in this particular verse, we have that this quote-unquote house is for those who visit and those who live near, and for those who humbly submit. In the other two verses, one of the things you mentioned is the house is a focal point, and it's also a place of security. So remember those points: focal point and a place of security. And the other one in chapter 3, 96, 97, it says that the Bayt is blessed and a guidance for mankind.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, those and also the purifying the quote-unquote house. So if you bear all of that in mind, focal point, security, blessed, guidance for those who visit and those who live near, those who humbly submit, none of that could you associate with a physical house.
Okay, if we grant all of that, if we did accept that, what is the significance of the Kaaba? Do you accept the Kaaba as a center of worship? Why is it significant to the God of Allah and to the Quran?
All right, when it comes to, let's say, when it comes to Sunnism and Shiism,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to defend Sunnism and Shiism, nor am I here to attack them.
Okay.
So I have no opinion about that whatsoever. You're going to have that discussion with them. The only thing I'm trying to clarify is that the Quran has nothing to do with this. So for instance, when you say Kaaba, the word Kaaba comes 4 times in the Quran. 3 times in chapter 5, 3 times in chapter 5, and one of them in... Bear with me, I'll quickly bring it up.
Do you believe in the Kaaba as a central place of worship, which people have to go to pilgrimage to, and that this was declared and set up by Allah?
That's not what the God associates with the word Kaaba in the Quran. The word Kaaba in the Quran.
Okay, what do you believe about the Kaaba? Because the thing is, we're going into a completely different discussion that has nothing to do with the subject matter or with Muslim belief at all. I mean, I would leave it up to you to discuss this with Muslims and to correct their beliefs. But what do you believe about the Kaaba? Just to
what do you think about the place in Mecca right now that is set up? And if you're a Muslim in the chat down below, please come back in. As soon as we're done with X, we were going to have you pop on. But yeah, what do you believe about that place they go to worship and pilgrim to right now? What do you think about that?
I don't, like I said, I don't have an opinion on that. My thing is only what's in the Quran. So that's all I wanted to clarify.
You don't have an opinion on the Kaaba.
Kaaba, as it pertains to the Quran, simply means prominence. That's it. That's all it means. It has nothing to do with the cubes.
I'm talking about the specific Kaaba, noun Kaaba, the special word Kaaba. Do you have any opinion on that specific cube which stands right there at the center of Mecca?
I have no opinion on that cube. But again, nothing to do with the Quran. As long as that's clarified, that's that.
Okay. I would
may I ask,
encourage you to change the minds of Muslims about that. I don't think we have much to discuss.
I'm not concerned about any preaching of any kind. The only thing I want is for people to understand what's actually in the Quran, and that's that.
I see. Okay.
Interesting. Well, thank you, X. Appreciate you joining me, man.
Thanks for letting me in.
Well, thanks for coming on. All right.
All right. Have a good.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Apostate Prophet. Tell us, what do you think of that? That was interesting.
Yeah, well, the issue is he makes a point and structures his arguments in such a way that he has to basically reinterpret Quranic texts, and he has to reinterpret the entire history and the entire foundation of Islam based on his own Islamic belief, which is separate from traditional Islamic beliefs, which is known as Quranism in Arabic, or in history it's known as the Quraniyun, or Quran-only Muslims. He doesn't call himself that, but that's what people call them. That's why he said, that's what you would call me. What they accept is that Muslims have basically corrupted Islam and misunderstood Islam. They have taken the sources, reports about Muhammad as an authority next to the Quran, and those sources to him and to other Quranists are completely invalid and irrelevant to the Islamic faith. And they basically structure their faith around just this worshipping of God without the majority of Islamic traditions and aspects. And that's the only way you could actually conclude the things that he concludes. And I have my opinions on that as well, on how I think that Quran-only Islam is not very logical, but that's completely off topic.
If I may, on this, when's the first time, do you know in history when the first Quran-onlyist pops up on the scene?
I don't know.
It'd be an interesting question because, I mean, the civil wars that happen out the gate should red flag anyone with critical thinking skills to say, there's a problem. I mean, like, Christians, for example, they do the same thing when they get to the New Testament. They don't see an issue they see an issue, but they just buy later narrative like Acts and 2 Peter, painting a unity between Peter and Paul, or James and Paul. There's definite division here, and we see that even in second century literature. So I just think this battle amongst like what matters, what counts, it doesn't count, and how you need to interpret it. I just wonder if the Quran onlyists are late to the game, kind of.
Well, the issue is hadiths only actually appeared as a concept, as collected proper books in a structured way, only at least 100 years after Muhammad, and the ones that are currently accepted as the most authentic appeared only 200 years after Muhammad's supposed death. So there is actually a point to saying, hey, the hadiths were not originally part of this, it was only the Quran. But the issue with that is, if you dismiss the hadiths, then you dismiss any source which will verify to you that the Quran is indeed this book which Muhammad declared to the people, which Muhammad recited to the people. And you will also have dismissed any kind of source which tells you how and why, in what shape and form, over what period of time the Quran was revealed. All you have is a book, and you have to somehow convince yourself to believe in that book.
Well, we have someone in the chat down below. I'm going to bring you on here. I hope everything is peaceful here. So again, AP, thank you for joining me here. Everyone go subscribe to Apostate Prophet on YouTube. You can go harass his live chats as well. And Truth and Knowledge, welcome to MythVision. Are you a Muslim?
Yes, I'm a Muslim, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh. Yeah, how are you guys?
Good, doing good. Thank you for joining us.
Great. I just wanted to ask AP, can you just like summarize your argument again? Because I wasn't tuning in.
Yeah, sure. The argument is that the Kaaba is considered by Islam, or in Islamic sources and Islamic belief, as the central place of worship, which was established by Abraham upon the instructions of Allah. And Abraham built this, invited mankind came. So this is the central place of worship for humanity, the special place of Allah, in the mother of cities, as the Quran says. But we cannot verify the historicity of Mecca. We cannot verify the historicity of the Kaaba. The Kaaba has nothing to do with Abrahamic religion, as far as we can see it, and so on.
I'm gonna cut you off real quick just to understand.
Sure.
So because we can't verify, that's evidence that it's not. Is that what you're saying?
To a certain extent, you could accept that if a very big claim is made and there is no evidence to it when there should be, then that puts the
I don't
claim
think
out.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's how it works, because I mean, I'm sure Derek knows. Derek, you're a Christian, right?
No.
Oh, you're not a Christian, but
I'm
there are
an
many
atheist.
other. You're an atheist. Okay, there are many other religions or theories that say something. Just because we haven't found evidence yet, it doesn't mean there is no evidence. There might be evidence that was washed away in history, destroyed for some
Okay,
reason.
let me cut off then you. Why do you
Sure.
have any reason to believe in the narrative if there is no evidence?
Well, I don't believe in Islam and the Quran based on what it says about the Kaaba. I have different reasons to believe why Islam is true, and based on that, I believe what the Islam says.
Well, that's exactly what you had the conversation with the guy on Pine Creek recently, AP. The guy was like, look, I don't have any evidence, right? I get it. There's no evidence yet, or according to him, like that we know of. But I believe because I trust the Quran as a miracle, as true. And because it says this, I trust it. And therefore, that's the evidence I need. So it sounds like you're in the same boat as the gentleman that AP talked with the other day on Pine Creek.
So you have to accept the narrative about the Kaaba based on a presupposition, which is that Islam is true based on other things, which is why that certain claim must also be true. Where do you exactly stop with that? How can we come to the conclusion that something that Islam says is wrong if you just accept everything as true from the get-go?
No, you don't just axiomatically accept Islam as true. There are arguments to why Islam is true, and then once you establish that, you can conclude everything that Islam says is true.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have reason to believe that Islam is definitely true, which is why you will accept the Islamic narrative about the Kaaba as true as well, even if we do not have any evidence, and even if the evidence seems to suggest the contrary of the Islamic claim.
What do you mean the evidence seems to suggest the contrary? What does that mean? Evidential
arguments, such as that Mecca does not appear in history, such as that the Kaaba does not appear in any source until after the emergence of Islam, such as that Abrahamic religion is entirely disconnected from the Kaaba, has no reference to it when it should have references to it, and so on. These are all evidences which suggest the contrary of Islamic's claim.
No, I would frame it as there might be various possibilities. As you know, humans, we're not perfect in our research, in our archaeological studies. We have limitations, and we're getting better with time. It could be the possibility that we haven't yet found archaeological evidence for the monotheistic claims. And I don't think...
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. I think this is a good question to ask, maybe.
Sure.
What's more probable? A 7th century literature developed, right? And I'm not being facetious. I honestly want to like reason with you here and hear what you have to say. But like a 7th century CE provenance, if you will, of a religion that's making a claim that stretches back to the 2nd millennia BCE or older, or the idea that this thing, it hasn't shown up, and we would think thered be some type of reference when we know for a fact
But brother Derek, there are plenty of things that haven't showed up and showed up later in history, right?
Let me tell you. Can I know your name, if that's okay?
I go by Truth.
Okay, Truth. Here is the issue. This is not simply a lack of evidence. This is not simply a lack of knowledge and information. What we have here, I mean, I don't think it would be appropriate to misrepresent this as simply lack of knowledge. That's not really the case. What is done here is the Islam makes a claim. The Islamic scripture makes a claim that Allah made this a place which was given to Abraham as the center of worship, as the first house on earth built for Allah, and the mother of cities. And Abraham was instructed to proclaim to humanity to come to the Kaaba. And according to the Islamic tradition, humanity came to the Kaaba from every distant pass. What we know about Abraham, however, is connected to the Israelite, to the Hebrew tradition.
But on what are you basing that? You're basing that on another religion.
Yeah, of course, because that's what we have, because that's the sources which you have. Because not based on their religious beliefs. Let me finish. The Quran treats the prophets and the Jewish history, the biblical history, as facts. The Quran references the prophets of the Israelites the entire time and informs us about the idea that those prophets were indeed legitimate people on a mission from Allah to spread truth to humanity. And those prophets are not all very old. By that, we would conclude that if the Kaaba was indeed the central place of worship, if Abraham did indeed spread this message to all humanity, at least the Jews, at least the Hebrews, the Israelites, would have some connection to this based on Islam's idea that the prophets were sent by Allah, that the books were sent by him. But we don't. They don't have any connection to it. We have no history, no reference to the Kaaba and to Mecca at all.
Yeah, but we're saying that the claim is Abraham spread monotheism. He didn't necessarily spread Islam in the sense that it is after Prophet Muhammad, which is with its specific teachings. No one ever made that claim.
Okay, your belief is that humanity went astray. Humanity was given a task to believe in Allah, to worship him. The Quran explicitly speaks of the practices which Abraham proclaimed to mankind when he invited them. But we don't find any traces of that at all. And it is absurd to believe that Jewish history is entirely, and Jewish scripture is entirely disconnected from that. No reference.
But just because we haven't found any evidence yet, it's not a positive argument against the Quranic claims. It's just not.
That would be absurd to suggest. It would be like believing that, I don't know, I can't even come up with a similarly absurd claim, which is like that in Germany 2,000 years ago, there was a giant place that everyone came to worship, but now nobody knows about this at all.
That could be the case. That could be the case.
That could not be the case. It is impossible to believe.
It's not logically impossible. Bro, it's not logically impossiple. There's nothing.
It is.
What?
It is completely contrary to the very fundamental concepts of archaeology and of anthropology.
My friend, is it logically impossible?
I don't care about the logical aspect of it. I care about the fact. I care about the fact. This is not a philosophy topic. I care about the fact that
everything is philosophy. When we're talking now, when we're arguing and discussing, you're using philosophy to reason.
Okay. I'm telling you something.
Sure.
By the basic fundamental standards of anthropology and of archaeology.
What basic fundamental standards of anthropology? What are you talking about?
That we go back, analyze evidences, analyze texts, analyze all kinds of human reports.
What does basic anthropology say that you've disproved Islam's claim? Is that what they've said?
That's not what I said. What I said is that such a thing would be considered a unbelievable, highly doubted, highly contrary to realities that we know, if it could not be verified by very basic anthropological, archaeological standards. We don't have any single source from the world that people all around the world went to the Kaaba to pilgrimage and to worship.
I got your point.
A single source from the Hebrew scriptures.
And why do you trust the Hebrew sources, first of all? First of all, why do you trust the Hebrew sources over Islamic sources? Second of all, just because
you are supposed to trust, not me.
No, why are you're using the Hebrew sources as an argument against Islam right now?
I'm not. That's not what I'm doing at all.
You just said the Hebrew sources. We didn't find it in Hebrew sources. Therefore, Islam is false.
I don't care what the Hebrew sources claim.
Then stop referencing the Hebrew sources.
What I'm telling you is that the Hebrew sources, by your standards and by the logic that we go with when we trust Islam,
no one said
should have contained
I'm gonna have to
some
mute
reference
Truth. I'm muting Truth.
To the
just
Kaaba.
So you know, real quick. I'm muting Truth. Let you get your phrase out, because I don't want this. We're not going to get anywhere. So finish your statement, Apostate, and then I'm going to switch. And obviously, I know you're not going to interrupt him, and we'll do our best here. So go ahead.
What I don't care about truth claims and what spiritual claims and all that the Hebrew scripture makes. This is a typical objection that is brought up when something doesn't make sense to the Islamic defenders. What I say is that going by the Islamic narrative, the Hebrew scriptures must have been reliable to a certain extent. By normal, logical, regular, secular standards, we would accept the Hebrew scriptures to at least have some reference to the Kaaba, to this place, if the Hebrew scripture, if the Hebrew tradition is what continues the legacy of Abraham, which even Islam itself bases itself on, but we don't find a single reference. That is impossible to believe. It is absurd. It is beyond absurd.
I'm gonna let Truth get in here. Truth, go for it, brother.
Yeah, it's not impossible what you're saying, and you're again, you're saying you don't want to appeal to the Hebrew sources, but you are. No one said that it has to be in the Hebrew sources for the Islam's claim to be true. There are many times which there were facts in sources that we might have not found, or later on we have discovered through archaeological evidence or whatever evidence there was. So I don't know how you're using your argumentation to say Islam's claim about the Kaaba is definitely false. You haven't made that argument yet.
I have.
I swear, yeah, dude, you have not.
I have.
You're like,
it's pretty clear. Islam makes a claim which says that Allah gave Abraham this big task. People actually complied. It happened that people from all around the world came, but in such a case, we would expect, any reasonable human would expect, that we would find at least some source, some trace to
no,
it.
it's not a requirement. It's not a requirement that you have to find. No,
it is.
It's not.
Truth, what reason would we accept it? I mean, look, I get it. Let me just say something real quick here. You're right that sometimes we find and discover something archaeologically, right? We haven't done that, right? So you're at least admitting to us, right, publicly, you're saying we don't have evidence of it, but
we don't have we don't have archaeological evidence yet, as far as I know. Maybe I haven't looked into it too much, but that doesn't mean it's false. You have to agree with that, Derek.
I mean, look, it's possible. Look, it's possible, but so is any other potential argument I can create in my head right now that has no factual basis. And what's more probable is the point I was trying to bring out earlier is like, you know, we see disputes among Mount Gerizim in Jerusalem and even mentions with Elephantine papyri. We have evidence of temples and structures and regions and competing sects and things like that. It's nowhere. And so what is the probability? Very, very unlikely, to the point where it's like you have to have faith. This isn't a matter of like factual basis. It's a matter of faith.
Yeah, but I don't base my belief of Islam based on what it says about a historical thing about the Kaaba.
Right.
Okay, could you believe that anything that Islam says, any claim that Islam makes, could be wrong?
No.
There we have it. Okay.
What does that mean?
Could any claim from the Quran be wrong? And
to me, no. So why is he laughing?
Why are we discussing?
So the reason he's saying that's important, just so you know, Truth, is it truth? Yes, truth.
Yes.
Is because that is a presupposition, right? If you start with it, it can't be wrong. If you actually go and investigate, let's just say, and there are scholars, PhD experts in the field who start to show, and I know you may not accept this, that's fine. I'm not even asking you to change your mind. I'm just pointing out, like, if there were some way to verify something like early manuscript transmission isn't as pretty as, let's say, the narrative is or something, and we have scholars that point that out, what will you do? Well, you're going to go with your imam before you're going to go with a PhD from Harvard or Oxford or anywhere else that might possibly be.
Okay. This is philosophy. Are you listening to this? This is
everything you've been discussing.
This is philosophy, and you're going against the very basic of it.
No, you're going the very look. You're saying, Derek, that if I see more evidence from PhDs and scholars and whatever archaeological people, that it's less likely, right?
No, I'm just simply saying if there's something that came up that invalidated what you believed about the Quran, or if there was evidence, I'm just pointing out it could be anything. Like I said, textual transmission, right? Like the Quran is a perfect word of God, directly orated from Gabriel to Muhammad. All right, it's perfect, right?
Yeah.
What if we have early Quranic manuscript transmissions that aren't as perfect as we think, and there are variants that aren't accurately identical?
I think you're very familiar that we've already, our academics have talked about the variants and the qira'at.
There's academic, if you would call them apologist, imam type, and then you have people in Oxford and places that are like Harvard.
I can present a very strong case. I don't know if you want me to send you an email.
Email me. Feel free to email me.
Yeah, but there are also other academics of Harvard and Yale.
And they say it's perfect. There's not any issues. It's like everything is.
No, what do you mean perfect? We have variations. Of course, we have qira'at, which were originally revealed in different dialects, but they don't contradict each other.
So everything, there's not a single contradictory transmission or any type of early manuscripts that may not perfectly agree with one another on every single minutia.
You mean
we
like
have, we have early manuscripts that are actually not entirely in agreement, but it is still being researched to what extent and why so. And we don't have and the earliest manuscripts that we have are not entirely complete. So.
Okay, yeah, that's a claim without any evidence. But what do you mean it's contradictory? Like one verse
that is very ironic. You just built your whole claim in this entire discussion on.
I'll tell you like this. Evidence. We'll take the burden off of you for a second. When I was a Christian.
Yeah,
I believe that Jesus, the words of the New Testament, were 100% accurate. They were infallible, and it was the word of God. There were no contradictions. You couldn't convince me. I didn't care what scholar you named. I didn't care who you wanted to point it out. It didn't matter because I had scholars I could list, I could name, and I could say, no, have you not listened to William Lane Craig? He's a PhD in philosophy, but he's a New Testament scholar, whatever. I can argue like all these things. And I never, ever, ever said, let me look and honestly question what I believe. It goes deeper than just.
But Derek, you're assuming I haven't questioned or haven't studied or haven't. If there is a clear contradiction, sure, then you have a case. You can show me this contradicts this, and we can talk about it.
Okay.
What's the issue? There's no issue.
Since we have gone off topic, I want to ask just one thing before I come back to the whole Kaaba issue for a final time before we end this discussion. Truth, I want to ask you one question. So you have reasons to believe that Islam is most definitely true, right?
Yes.
And if we did now find out that Muhammad makes certain prophecies which are clearly disproven, which are clearly proven false, and these are authentic narratives, would you accept those as false? Would you accept Muhammad's prophecies as false, or would you simply dismiss this?
Give me an example.
Forget about the example. If we did find out that something that Muhammad says is false, a prophecy that he makes is false, is not factual, is clearly disproven, what would you do with that?
I would re-examine. I would see there must be something wrong. That might be a good case for you to make if you have that, but you haven't done that.
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you one example very quickly, without going further into a discussion. I just want to see what kind of a sentiment you have about that. Sure. Muhammad made a prophecy saying that when some people came to him and asked him when is the last hour, he turned toward a young boy who was in his presence and said explicitly in these words, "Do you see this young boy? If he lives before he grows very old, the last hour will come to you." That in the context, this clearly means that the last hour, the day of judgment.
Are you a scholar of Islamic interpretation and hadith to say what the context is?
So you want to reinterpret the very explicit words?
It's not about reinterpreting. It's about when I look at the hadith and the Quran. Don't laugh because you're not making a point right now. When you look at the hadith and the Quranic, narrative, you have to consult the scholars and the academics, not a guy on YouTube.
I won't consult the scholars. I will look at the clear words.
Of course, you want to
look at what they say.
What you're doing.
If the word clearly says something that is wrong, I will not go to scholars who are biased and say, "Hey, can you please tell me why this is not true? Please give me a reinterpretation."
When you study the Quran and Hadith, you look at the Quranic studies. People get degrees in this. This is in every field. You don't just a guy on YouTube. This is what the verse means. This is what the Hadith means. No, it doesn't work that way.
So what? They clearly say something that is false. But coming back to the whole Kaaba issue.
You got your food. Now you're the subject. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I just said I would do. Coming back to the Kaaba issue. So what we have is that the Quran makes a very huge claim about.
And you can't disprove that claim.
About the Kaaba and the world, a claim that seems ridiculous by any proper standard. We would expect by the claim, we would explain. We would explain by the implications of this claim that the Quran makes that we would find some trace in the world about this thing called the Kaaba, but we don't find any reference to it until textual sources after the emergence of Islam.
No, that's not a requirement for it to be a claim or not.
It is.
Because you don't find it in the Hebrew sources, therefore it's false. That's a fallacious argument.
That's not what I said. What I just said. So by these standards, any reasonable person accepts the claim that the Kaaba that Islam makes as probably nonsense. Most likely false. The average rational person would definitely agree that based on these circumstances, we would most definitely,
No, the
most
average
likely
rational person
accept the Islam. Can you please mute him, Derek, please?
Yeah. All right.
Would,
so let him finish.
would definitely conclude that the Islamic claim is nonsensical, baseless, very far-fetched, most likely untrue, almost definitely untrue. We just cannot conclude for certain that it is untrue, because we have to. There is one little scientific aspect which we have to respect, and even if it is complete absurd nonsense, we are not supposed to say it is we're not supposed to say it is clearly false. But every reasonable person will accept that it is.
Okay, before
nonsense.
I unmute him,
And despite this, our friend here, based on his presupposition that Islam is true, will not accept this evidence, which everyone very much accepts, and has to go on saying that I am therefore ignorant or a liar, or that we are bad. I mean, I don't know what else is there to discuss.
Okay, I'm going to unmute him in just a second. So, Truth, bear with me here. I want to allow him to respond to you. And then if you do want to respond to him, but we do have another person down in the queue. So let's wrap this one up and then we'll go ahead and go to the next one. All right, Truth, have your piece, my friend.
Yeah, just to be clear, AP, I never called you ignorant or insulted you or anything. Just to make it clear.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, you're making a fallacious argument, because just because we haven't seen evidence right now of the claim, it doesn't mean it's false. Also, we don't believe that Islam is true based on what it says about the Kaaba. We have other reasons and arguments to conclude that Islam is most likely the truth, and through that, we conclude whatever Islam says about something is true. For you to dismiss that, you have to disprove with evidence, with clear-cut evidence, that Islam's claim is false, and you haven't done that.
Truth, this is an evidential problem. It's an evidential argument. That is how it works. This is how we discuss.
What is the evidential argument?
This is how it works. It's an evidential problem.
What is the evidential argument?
Which means that this is supporting evidence, strong supporting evidence.
What is the strong supporting evidence?
That the Islamic claim. That the Islamic claim is false. This is how it works, okay? You cannot simply dismiss something as fallacious. It is a strong evidence, even if it is not logically contradictory. Something can be an evidential problem, an evidential argument to further suggest that something is most likely wrong. This is a very basic concept, okay? I don't see how you could possibly disagree with this unless you don't know about how these arguments work. But this is an evidential problem.
There's a statement that goes, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Okay, but Derek, we're not saying that Islam is true because of what it says about the Kaaba. We have different reasons.
But you have just explained to us that you would never accept something about Islam as wrong because you would just either reinterpret it or dismiss it because you have other reasons to believe in it.
No,
or go to a scholar. So what are we?
That's a different story. You're making a claim about a hadith without context, without scholarly interpretation, without.
You will say the same thing about everything that I bring up.
Well,
you guys disagree.
You can't just make a claim about quantum physics and you don't know anything about it, or you're not a scientist in quantum physics.
You probably aren't either.
You have to ask the professionals about the Islamic position.
Okay, I think we're done.
Well, I thank you, Truth, and
thank you. You got it.
We can do this again in the future if AP comes back. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, peace.
All right, peace.
Thanks.
All right, yeah, I appreciate you, and I know we've got a guy down here in the queue, but he's not joinable. I thought he was going to join. If there's any other Muslims that would like to join, I know you probably don't have too much more time here, AP, but would you like to comment before we have anyone join? Like, I personally, I get where you're coming from. Okay. Is it possible? You know, it reminds me of that Jim Carrey scene on Dumb and Dumber where he's like, is there a chance? And she's like 1 in a million. And he's like, so you're telling me there's a chance? And like, is it possible? Sure. I mean, but then again, you're going into this really, really, people say that all the time, what are the possibilities? Anything's possible. But when you have a claim like that, it says when what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And there's no reason to accept it without that evidence. You have to believe something else, which is why you brought up presupposition.
You even have a more universally accepted method, which is Occam's razor, which is applied through science and philosophy, which is that you would never or not go for a certain conclusion, which requires the larger amount of assumptions. And in this case, we would have to assume that that this general universal place of worship, which Abraham invited the world to, was forgotten for some reason by everybody who came there, was forgotten by mankind, that all scriptures, that all evidence to it, that all texts referring to it were lost, that the Hebrew people completely, despite their divisiveness, got rid of this reference for some weird reason, that they also entirely collectively forgot about this for some reason, and so on. It is ludicrous to believe in this.
I think they would have condemned it if it was even relevant. It would have been or at least somehow we'd have evidence from there that dates to this period, and there's engagement, because we found elephantine papyri, right? 3rd, 4th, 5th century BCE in southern Egypt. We have elephantine Jews that practiced and built a temple. They wrote to Judah, of course. So if they're like somehow connected, I mean, you have to assume these guys were like outside of all of that, but then all of a sudden they're using, and I'm talking about the Quran is, from what I understand, is using the Hebrew Bible to some respects, at least the characters from it. If they started off with a complete different attachment to something that we had no literature for, and they built their own myth, so to speak, their own foundation story of how they came to be and how God chose them. Instead, they chose this guy Abraham, which already raises huge red flags, because now we have this enormous amount of evidence from a biblical standpoint and extra biblical sources between when this stuff's being written, and let's grant 9th century for critical scholars, BCE for some of this literature, all the way down to the 7th century CE of literature that is writing on this topic. And they don't mention this particular, the most important place, bigger than Jerusalem, bigger than Gerizim, like all of that. It's the most important.
There's one thing that I want to quickly add to that, which is I try to do something during the discussion. I try to refer to a universal center of worship in Germany, for example, which is at the heart of Europe. This is kind of a form of reducing the whole argument to an absurd example to show how ridiculous it is. I mean, going by his logic, you could argue that there was once a universal center of worship just 2,000 years ago that people from all around the world came to. And you could say, well, you can't dismiss that because we don't have any evidence that this was not the case. But yeah, okay, we don't have any evidence that this was not the case. And you could always wait for evidence for anything in the world. But hey, looking at history, we have very serious reasons to conclude that there probably was no such place. And this is called evidence. This is evidence. Evidence does not mean you have to bring some concrete proof, some written document which says there was no such place in Germany. No, evidence can be the absence of something in such a case, which we then can use to conclude that a certain claim which Islam makes, for example, is most likely wrong. That's all it is.
You're right about this on the Exodus. And I don't want to get lost into the biblical stuff, but Dr. Robert and Price so finally says, then we're going to bring our guest on who's down in the queue. I appreciate you guys jumping in, those who are Muslims. And we are trying to be friendly here. I'm not trying to be facetious, but it is an interesting discussion. He said, well, the other Exodus didn't happen, right? Or, he popped off. Come back on if you're wanting to join us. The Exodus either didn't happen or God sent angels down from heaven to vacuum up all the evidence. And so now when we look to see what paths they could have taken or where that this many people went on this journey. I mean, we're talking, I think, 600,000 men, and then the women and children included, well over a million, I mean, the number's a lot. We don't see that. There's no archaeological evidence for it. Therefore, what do you do? Well, it's there. And this is what Christians do. I'm not even trying to pick on Muslims, right? And Jewish people and the Christians, they all look at this Judaism and they say, well, it's there, but the numbers are allegory, or like there's always an explanation to get out of it. So welcome, my friend. Are you a Muslim?
No.
Turn up your volume a little bit because we can't really hear you. I apologize.
Hello?
Yes. So you are a Muslim.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
After
yes,
this
I'm a
one,
Muslim.
after this one, we're wrapping it up, ladies and gentlemen.
First of all, I'd like to apologize because my English is not so good.
No problem. No problem.
Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes.
What do you have?
Yes, yes.
What do you have to say?
I have a question to Ridwan.
Yeah.
It's
I think
about
there's a major delay.
the verse of Becca.
Okay.
Does he know where Becca is?
Which Becca are you referring to?
Hello?
I think there's a huge delay here. But which Becca are you referring to? What Becca do I know where it is?
Ridwan?
Yes?
Yeah, can you hear us? I think his connection's really bad. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think your connection's bad, my friend. If you can't hear us right now, you might end up having to just listen to us afterwards and know that I mean no disrespect. I apologize. I did want to have that, but look, I know we've been on quite a while, and I do appreciate your time, AP. Let's do this again, man.
Okay. I just want to quickly address what he most likely wanted to ask. I think the question that he was going for is he wanted me to answer the question where Becca is in the Bible, which is an argument, a baseless argument, which he got from those certain Muslim apologists that I argued with. The response to that is simply there is no such thing called Becca in the Bible. There is a place called Valley of Bahai in the Bible, which is a valley before Zion, which at the time of the writing of that certain text was already known as Jerusalem, where the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant stood. So the Valley of Bahai would then be is translated as the Valley of Weeping, or the Valley of Crying, or the Valley of certain trees. It would be a valley that is in front of before Zion, before Jerusalem. And the scholarly opinion is generally that it refers to a certain valley. I think it's called the Valley of Rephaim or something like that, or to a random valley. And this is no surprise because we have many such references within the Bible that refer to certain places based on their attributes, and we can't exactly pinpoint where they are because they are not of that big of a significance. That's all it is.
Let's give him one more chance. Can you hear us? We can hear you, well, we did hear you. Can you speak? See if your internet connection's better. My friend, you're on the air.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, AP, I appreciate you, man. Look, let's do this again. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope the Muslims watching also, enjoyed it to some degree. I know a lot of my audience definitely did, and I appreciate you coming on. That was fun. And I have some scholars when I get back from California that are Islamic scholars, and they're critical, right? So they're going to point out things. And I've purchased about 7 books, so I'm going to be pretty busy reading a lot of stuff, man. Oh, man, this is going to be fun.
I would love to help you there.
Yeah, I know, right? Man, thank you. Once again, go subscribe to his YouTube channel, Apostate Prophet. He's mainly, all of his content is centered around Islam and the religion of Islam, and that's where he came from. So those of you who are MythVision and you come over, understand that's his thing, right? I've even asked him, like, hey, invite me on, let's do a Bible jab. He's like, I'm focusing on Islam, right? Like that's your main thing. So I respect that, man. I understand someone needs to do it in the atheist community because there aren't any. I mean, it's like the last time I heard, and maybe you can comment on this before we go, is Cosmic Skeptic was like, I don't know, threatened, and he was like, I'm not doing this anymore or something.
Yeah. He received a threat, a very legitimate. I mean, a threat that sounded legitimate, based on one video that he made, in which he basically argues that Islam can be criticized and deserves to be criticized, and we shouldn't silence people for that. Ironically, for that very video, he received a threat that sounds very terrible. And he decided to, and the thing is, it's not just he himself who received a threat. It was apparently like, it got more personal than that. Wow. So he decided to just take it down. And talked to him a little bit about that. I don't know, but it's a problem. I when I started all of this, I saw that people in general, atheists, even many ex-Muslims, have this feel this need to not just focus on Islam, but also talk about something else because they want to appear fair or something like that. And I thought, hey, I don't want to be that guy. I want to put my entire focus on Islam, and that's what I have been loyal to so far, I think. But no, thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciated this. I would love to talk again in the future.
Always enjoy it, ladies and gentlemen. Please help us out in any way. You could join the Patreon, early access. I got a bunch of stuff coming with Dr. Richard Carrier, Dr. Dennis R. McDonald. Again, thank you, AP. Guys, stay away from Islam. I stole his outro, man.
That was great. Stay away from Islam.
Stay away from Islam. We are MythVision.